Can you hear me now, Mary?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. And the time is 12:30.
Welcome, everyone, to the Moraga-Orinda Fire District Special Board Meeting for April 14th, 2025. It's 12:30. I'll call the meeting to order. And then can we have a roll call, please?
Director Danziger,
Here.
Director Hassler,
Here.
and Director Hassler is participating by Zoom from Florida. Director Jex,
Here.
Director Romer,
Here.
and Chair Vice President Jorgens.
Here. Okay, can we have a pledge of allegiance, please?
And Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Do we have any public comment on items that are not on the agenda?
And so public comment is open for items that are not on the agenda. And we do not have any hands raised, and we've not received any written public comment.
Okay.
Item 3, a public workshop for the long-range financial forecast for April 2025.
Good afternoon, directors. The long-range financial forecast has been updated. The long-range forecast, next slide, please. The long-range forecast covers a forward-looking 10-year period. The forecast is separate from the annual operating budget. The long-range forecast is scheduled for adoption at the next regular board meeting in May. Preparation of the fiscal year 2026 operating budget is in process. All of the budget pieces that you see on the slide are complete and reflected in the long-range financial forecast. You will see in the next agenda item after this afternoon, when we discuss the budget, that the budget is substantially complete pending board direction. The significant assumptions used in the forecast are listed on the slide. Property tax revenue for fiscal year 2026 has been projected by HDL, who are the district's property tax revenue consultants. After fiscal year 2026, the forecast uses an assumption of 3.5% per year property tax revenue growth in scenario A. Scenario B includes a property tax revenue growth assumption of 2.5%. Ambulance revenue is projected to increase 3.7%. Then 1.5% throughout the forecast. Net strike team revenue is projected starting at $222,000 in the general fund and $75,000 in the capital projects fund, with a 5% increase to mirror the salary increases, and then 3.5%. The Tunnel East Bay Hills Fuel Break administrative fee is forecast to be $734,000 and is forecast to go into the general fund, consistent with what happened after the end of the last fuel break grant. This is subject to board direction. Salaries and overtime expenditures are forecast to increase 5% on July 1, 2025 and 2026 per the terms of the MOUs, then 3% thereafter, consistent with the last forecast. Safety salaries include 48 positions, all of which are currently filled. Non-safety salaries include 18 full-time equivalent positions and 3 part-time positions for the new single-role paramedic system. Benefits are forecast to increase 3%. Cesara rates are forecast based on Cesara projections for the first 5 years, then based on calculations completed using the GovInvest software. OPEB contributions are included at the full actuarially determined contributions. Finally, pension trust contributions are included in accordance with the district's pension funding policy adopted by the board last November. The policy states the contributions will be calculated using a discount rate that is 50 basis points lower than the rate used by Cesara, also using investment returns based on the most recent actual investment results from Cesara, and salary increases based on the current MOUs. So this has all been incorporated into the forecast. Next slide. The next slide reviews pension costs in more detail. So the Cesara board uses a discount rate of 6.75%. Cesara's actual investment returns for calendar year 2024 was 8.3%. These investment returns will affect the district's Cesara rates beginning July 1, 2026. Cesara provided updated 5-year projections of the district's pension rates that are listed on the slide. I draw your attention to the table on the left-hand side of the slide, particularly the numbers highlighted in light blue. This section is an important part of understanding the financial challenges over the next 4 years facing the district. The safety classic percentages in the chart are a percentage of pensionable pay. Cesara rates were stable in the 70% range for 8 years. Then in fiscal year 2024, the rates increased 10% to 80%. Then in fiscal year 2025, the rates increased an additional 10% to 91.3%. The rates are projected to continue to increase to over 100% to 100.82% over the next 4 years. This is a significant financial development. The pie graph shows the total planned funding in the long-range forecast designated for pension costs. The blue part of the graph reflects mandatory costs to be paid to Cesara. The red part of the graph shows the planned contribution per district pension funding policy to the separate pension trust account. The trust contributions reflected in red are board directed. Okay, so the board does have discretion over the red section. The total funding designated for pension costs totals $9.3 million in fiscal year 2026, which reflects a discount rate at 6.25%. Next slide. The graph illustrates projected unrestricted fund balance for the next 10 years based on the forecast under both scenario A and B. Finally, the next slide, please, shows the outstanding balance for the debt that was issued to finance the construction of Station 43. The outstanding balance is $1,800,000 and the interest rate is 2.14%. This is the last slide and it details capital projects. The draft fiscal year 2026 budget, which you'll hear about in detail in the next agenda item, includes 6 capital requests that are listed on the slide. The long-range forecast includes funding for Station 41 rebuild at $9.4 million and for an administration rebuild of $1.2 million. The forecast projects funding the capital projects using transfers out of the general fund and existing funds in the capital projects fund, as well as the fire flow tax, which goes into the capital projects fund. Staff requests board direction on the forecast. This concludes the presentation.
We'll have any board discussion, so we can prepare as a workshop.
And we just want to make sure that you mute your microphones.
I'm sorry, I didn't have mine muted. Do we have any board discussion? This is our workshop, so it's a time to have.
I have a question for Gloria Ann, and you've told us this before, but it's been a while. The increase in the Cesara pension payments for the next 5 years, can you just explain to that why that occurred? I know you've talked about it before, but it's been a while, so.
Right, it's a combination of a variety of things, but there are actuarial losses that are mostly is what is driving those increases in the rates.
And poor rate of return for last year or the year before, or?
Yes,
And so the reason for those increases, and it's gonna, however, how many years it took, it like 5 more years, I think. That's to kind of catch up for what didn't occur for that 1 year? Is that all?
right, okay, so the losses are spread over several years, and it depends on the loss, and as well as sometimes there's assumption changes that are spread over different amounts. And usually it's spread over 18 years, I think, most of it. And so then different layers come on, different layers go off. But the next 4 years, Cesara is projecting that the rates will increase.
And once have they already told us the rates for those years, or are these assumptions?
So the rates for fiscal year 2026 have been set by the Cesara board. And then the projections for the 4 years beyond 2026, they have not been set by the board yet. But
Okay.
that is the latest projections from the Cesara's actuary.
Okay.
Their projections are almost fixed, I would assume, based on what we know now, based on performance, historical performance, and the allocation of the rate. So could we assume that these are pretty fixed within a plus or minus of 10%?
I can respond to that. No, the current, this year is, but no, they vary quite radically. And for example, if the market had stayed where it was
Last week,
last week, we actually would have seen a pretty much lower probably increase, because remember here you're talking about, this is the unfunded liability. So the unfunded liability, it just goes up and down really frankly with the market as much as anything else. So it's very, very market dependent.
go ahead. You have questions? So there were a number of things back in your presentations we went through, so I'm not sure they're in any particular order, but so you said that 2024 rate for Cesara was 8.3%, I think it was. And you used that just for last year in the models. What did you use as the rate of return going forward in the portfolio?
So it's at the 6.25% discount rate.
The discount rate, but what about the growth rate for the portfolio? Is that 6.75?
Okay, so Cesara assumes 6.75, and then I use the GovInvest software that assumes 6.25.
Okay, but they assume 6 3/4 in Cesara's rates
Correct.
for the future. Okay. That's great. And then looking at the capital tab in the spreadsheet, I didn't see that there was the money in there for the 2 fire engines that we have contracted already, but that are late in delivery. Was that actually in the capital forecast?
Yes, so that is considered as an expenditure in fiscal year 2025. So that is in the projected for 2025 as having been spent for those 2 fire engines.
Even though we're not going to spend it this year.
Correct.
So where do we put the cash? Because these are cash forecasts, right?
No, it's not a cash forecast. No, it's expenditures and revenue.
Well, expenditures are cash, and revenue is cash. So where do we put the money that isn't cash?
It's in the fund, the money that's not cash. Sorry, I don't understand.
Well, if we have, you said we have money in the 2025 budget, someplace in here, you said there's money. If I look at the capital sheet, I don't think I saw that though. It shows the 25, 26, it shows it doesn't have the 2.1 in there. So you're saying it's in 24, 25?
Correct. It's in the current year, fiscal year 2025. It's on row 39. We're showing capital expenditures of 3.7 million. And so it's in part of that $3.7 million.
Okay, so 2.1 of that or 2.2 of that is that number.
Correct.
So the cash that we're actually not going to spend this year is in the capital account, the capital fund then. It will remain in the capital fund and roll into next year because we're not actually going to spend it this year. We're not going to write a check yet, right? Because we pay for them when we actually get delivered, but at a fixed price.
Correct.
So that money will just stay in the capital fund and not get spent, in other words.
Yes.
Okay. That works.
Do we invest that money? That's.
Yes, we do.
That's part of the investment money.
Okay, and then on the number we have, I'm not sure what the title of it here is. What's it called? It's called charges for services and no, it's what is it? Use of money and property. That's our interest income, right? Basically.
Yes, that's our investment and interest earnings.
Right. So it looks like that was just a hardwired number that you put in as $900,000 a year for a long time. It's not based on the actual capital balance that we have.
So the $900,000, so we're projecting in fiscal year 2025 that we're going to have $1 million in investment earnings.
Right.
And so then the 900,000 is kind of derived from that $1 million basically as kind of an estimate. So yes, so I just use 900,000 through the forecast.
Except that as we build our buildings and things, that number is going to come down a lot. The amount we have in our reserves is going to go down by about half. And the interest rates are going to go from currently 4-ish% down to 2-ish% if we're lucky, meaning it's probably going to go below 2%. So we're probably going to have, well, the way I did the forecasts, and I'm off because I did incorrectly include those 2 fire engines, but it's going to go almost to zero out in 3 or 4 years from 900,000 a year. So even next year, it's going to go, the market predicts it's going to go down to, at the end of next year, 1.3%. So instead of the current 4-ish%. So that number is going to be a lot smaller going forward. So we should talk about what we think the correct, first off, it should be based on not just a number, we should be based on the capital balance that we have and how much money we're going to have in the bank earning interest. And it's a little bit hard to do in the model, but because otherwise you get a circular reference, but you just have to subtract, including that amount, and it'll get close anyway. But we have roughly half of the ending year balance in the bank all year. And then we don't actually use all that. Some of it we leave in cash or near cash and don't earn any money on it. So you probably earn about, the interest rate we're saying on about 80% of the money that we have. At least historically, that's about when it's been. You've been keeping a little extra cash, which is fine. But I'm just saying that. So when I did it, I ended up with numbers that were going out. Next year, it was going to be, more like $250,000, not $900,000. And then it kind of stays there and goes down as we use a lot of cash to build buildings. So you can use, again, I'm off a little bit. I sent a soft copy to the chief so you can go back and see my work if you want to. But that's something that I think we definitely need to work on. As far as in the past, we had assumed that we were fully staffed. I'm trying to think which way we did this because we just changed this year, I think, as far as whether we were forecasting the lower number of people that we were actually paying for and then higher overtime. I think that's what we had actually forecast on a regular basis, or do we assume full staffing?
So for the fiscal year 2025 budget, the board directed to budget based on what the positions that were filled at the time.
Right.
So I think it was as around last May. So whatever staffing we had at the time. So we budgeted based on those positions plus whatever we thought the overtime would have been based on staffing at last May.
Right. And so for this year though, and for the long range forecast, we now are changing our staffing because we're going to actually be fully staffed from now on at 48, right? But the overtime didn't change very much. And so now that we're going to be staffing fully, in other words, having all the positions filled, shouldn't the overtime come down? Because it used to be that we sort of forecast understaffing and had a lot of overtime, which was reality. And now we're going to have full staffing, so the overtime ought to come down.
Right. So for the fiscal year 2026 budget, and Carol will explain this when we get to the budget more, but yes, we budgeted okay, so the safety staffing is going to be reduced to 48 safety positions, and all of those positions are currently filled. So so that is, the budget is on the 48 safety, plus it's also based on it's basically 18 full-time, non-safety, single role paramedic positions. So the cost of all 18 of those positions is in the budget that we're going to present in the next item. And that's also in the long range forecast as well. So the overtime, right, we did some work on the overtime, because there will be some, it might be a little high. It's kind of hard to say. So I erred on the making it a little higher to hopefully that we'll have enough there. I think that because there is a built-in overtime component in the single role paramedic system, since those are 40-hour-a-week positions, but they'll likely be, most weeks be working more than that. So those people will still have overtime, and will still have safety overtime as well. So at this point, right, it's kind of the best that we had at this point. So it might be a little high.
Because it's roughly equivalent to last year's, and we weren't fully staffed last year, right?
That's correct, sir. We weren't at our allocated 57 positions.
Right.
I'm sorry, Marcia. Sir, you're correct. We weren't fully.
So, because I mean, I realize there are a whole bunch of things that affect overtime, but generally, you know for sure that all the vacation people have that they're going to take. That's true. And we know that there's some predictable-ish amount of sick time, for example. And then stuff happens. I realize, people get called on to things, but we ought to be able to be reasonably close. And it seems that if we're fully staffed this year and we normally aren't fully staffed and that led to high overtime, I would think that it would go down instead of going up. I think it went up this year. So just something to look at, I guess that's what I'd say. And then I noticed on the capital side, we had depreciation for a few of our buildings, but not all of them. And I think we actually ought to, on the big things that we have, the fire trucks, fire engines, ambulances, and the buildings, we ought to be able to figure out roughly what the depreciation is on those things every year. And that's generally the amount I think we talked about last time that should go into the capital account every year as the money we're putting aside for the future capital expenditures that we need to make. But I don't think that actually, you put a number in and it turned out the number might be pretty close, but I don't think that's how, it was just a number that got typed in. It wasn't a calculation. So can we make it a calculate, actually do the depreciation on the capital side and then actually include that number each year as a calculated number in our forecast?
So what the depreciation, so the board direction last year regarding the depreciation set aside to capital was to depreciate the 3 fire stations that are outside of the replacement period. Okay, so we have a 10-year replacement period. And in this forecast is the planned cost to replace 2 of the stations effectively in there. The 45 to do the remodel and then 41 and admin. So the board direction last year was to do the other 3 fire stations that are outside of the replacement period to start setting aside money for that depreciation. Then the board also directed to do the same theory for vehicles outside of the 10-year replacement period and equipment that's outside to set aside the depreciation for that. So I did look, so that was based on, I looked at our capital assets as of now and I took the depreciation for those actual stations, right? And the reason it doesn't change for the stations is because the depreciation is just based on the cost of the station, the historical cost that we paid, and then we depreciate from there. Oops, sorry, I'm whacking you. Sorry. So that's why the costs aren't changing, because it's really pretty static. The stations are static. And then also plus the other thing, we didn't have that much since we raised our capitalization threshold to $40,000. So then we don't have that much new equipment. Most of our purchases are falling below that capitalization amount. So that's why the numbers didn't change, but I did, and I have those schedules. I did go back to the schedules and make sure that those depreciation amounts are current.
Okay. So there can be a number that since we have the depreciation here, we can just roll that number up in and include it as a formula if we wanted to, instead of just because otherwise we don't know how to track it. It doesn't show up anyplace. It's just a number you have that is outside.
Right, it's in a separate spreadsheet.
Okay. Maybe we should attach the spreadsheet to this model or something then somehow, because otherwise it just looks like a typed in number. Okay. And let's see. Overtime, engines, the interest, appreciation. So, and then the biggest one, of course, is the numbers that we had in capital for the replacement of 41 and the improvement of 45. And I know we were going to be talking to the architect to see if we had new numbers for those. Was there any update on those?
There's no update currently. We expect beginning of next month for the cost estimators to come back with some estimates.
For both 45 and 41?
Station 45 remodel.
Right.
We have some very preliminary rough numbers, but I think some of that is dependent upon how we configure and how we address administration.
Okay.
So in terms of the costs for Station 41, there's a number of different variables.
Mhm.
One of which is what our needs are and what we want out of the facility. And second is how we want it to be formed. So it's not just a fire station, it's also a training facility. It's our only training facility in the district. So to include that. So those estimates are based on an evaluation of other recent constructions.
When I was in the meeting about 45, we heard that the building for 45 that just got done in, I don't know, San Mateo or someplace was $16.4 million. And he said that was, that's a year or so old, and that was, things are going up since then. And by the time you get it built, it's going to go up. And then he said that's the hard cost. You had to add 30 to 50% to that, including the soft costs. We have a much different number than that in here at the moment. For 45, to 41, we have, it's my new number, sorry. You guys can probably tell me what it is, but it was more like $9 million. So we're off by half. So I would recommend, given that we have a number that he gave us for an old number, at least we could put in the 16.4, add 30% to it, and that's on the low side. And that doesn't, when you say training, I thought the training was all the stuff are we changing the equipment and the space and whatever that's out back? Or is there something other than training we have currently?
Well, so for example, a classroom, which was one of the preliminary discussion items, or an area, a room for people to congregate, was one of the preliminary discussion items under Chief Winokur. So that was one piece. The second piece is through the construction in the rear, there's large asphalt areas and then rock where we train. So much of that area will likely need to be removed. But again, these are all preliminary. These are just discussions. We're not under contract for any services for Station 41. Currently, we're investigating the construction delivery method that's most appropriate and legal. So we're still in the fact-finding investigation phase for Station 41.
Right. But in our long-range forecast, we have to make estimates, and we have to do them now. We can't do them, in a year or two when we have an architect to do those things. So the best number that I know of is the one that our currently hired architect already gave us for a similar fire station. That's just the fire station, not the training, not the admin, all of that. I don't see how we could put in a lower number than that, because that's kind of the minimum we have to have. And if we want to have add-ons, I think that'd be okay. But I don't see how we can use a lower number than the one we already know.
Yes, sir. So I'll work with our architect. He did provide some very preliminary numbers, like Chief Lambert said, that we're on an old design for Station 41, and it was an astronomical number with it was a Taj Mahal, a huge training room, 8 bedrooms, just something that's not practical. So I wasn't going to bring that number before the board because that wasn't realistic to what we would present to the board as a new station rebuild, or a new fire station for Station 41. So I need to talk with the architect and say, okay, let's scale it down. We're not building that large facility that was anticipated a couple years ago. So we can knock out a few bedrooms. We don't need the 8 bedrooms. We don't need a 20+ person training room. What are these other things that we can do to get that cost down to a more reasonable number, if you will?
So was the 16.4 million something that had 8 bedrooms and a training facility and all that?
Not to my knowledge, sir. That 16 whatever $million, that was for a different agency's facility. So when Chief Lambert met, and correct me if I'm wrong there, Lucas, when you talked to the architect, he said these were the preliminary plans that he had talked to Chief Winokur about a couple years ago, 8 bedrooms, 20+ person training facility. And he said that there's a rough number for you. And that's not what we're looking at. So I want to get a better number, but to your point, sir, it's going to be around $16 million if
Plus the 30%.
plus the 30.
Which gets you to more like 20. And then on admin, I think we had also had a little discussion about, we looked a little bit at rentals and things nearby. And they're sort of $3.50 a square foot per month. And if you kind of if we need 3,000 square feet-ish for admin, that ends up being about $126,000 a year. And if you can buy the building for what are they asking, 2.5 or 3 or something for the same buildings? That's, a 15 or 20-year payback, which is not a good deal. So it looks to me like we would be renting going forward and, nearby instead of buying at the moment, and certainly not rebuilding, because we could, when you spend $1,600 a foot to build things, turns out to be a really crazy number, especially for an office building. So I did those changes in the draft that I sent you. I put in the $126,000 under normal operating costs, starting in next year, not this coming. Actually, I started in 26, 20. What year are we in? In 25, 26, I included it. But I just hardwired it in because I didn't know where else to put it in. Sorry.
So just make sure that I get this the way that you want it. All right, so for the administration, there's $1.2 million in capital projects expenditure. So remove the $1.2 million.
I'm putting it out here for discussion. I'm just saying that's what I think. I think that it would be a lot of money to spend, 1.2, but it's more than that. I think if we're going to have a 3,000 square foot building and $1,600 a square foot, that's $3.2 million. So, that's a lot. And renting that for $126,000 a year, you would, with the interest on your money, you'd never pay it back. So I can't imagine we would ever want to build admin instead of renting admin. Comments, thoughts?
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And I'm wondering if you've even taken into consideration what I think we all are concerned about based upon the events of the last couple of weeks, the effect on the stock market, the bond market, the inflation rate. It makes it even more problematic. I mean, one of the most important things for businesses and for a special district is some certainty in costs going forward. And we certainly are less certain now than we were even a few weeks ago.
Does that seem like an okay assumption to tell Gloria to have this guidance, or we should think about renting, forecast renting versus buying or building rather? We're not buying, we're building.
I think that's something that once we get to the next item in the budget, I think we should talk about.
Okay.
I think that'd be more appropriate at that time than right now for the long range.
Okay. So then we'll just come back to the long range one after we figure it out for the budget.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I think those were the majority of my comments on what's going on in it. And the thing that all that drives you to, if you use the big number, the $20-ish million for rebuilding 41, you end up with, the big problem is in what year? In the 28-29 forecast, you end up with about a 23% reserve balance 23% of and so that's way below the lower threshold that we have had, I think. And I don't even know if that's enough to get us through the year without borrowing from the county. What kind of number do we normally have to be able to make it throughout the year? Because that's the year-end number.
I'll have to look. It's been several years since we've had to use the teeter plan, and which would be use the county's money before the property tax revenue comes. So I'll have to look at I'll have to look at that again.
It'll be a little better than that because I had assumed that $2 million outflow for the fire engines that you said was already out, but I guess you included the balance in the capital account for that. So I guess you'd already taken out of the capital account though, right? For this year,
Yes.
even though no, you didn't really take it out. So tell me again how you did that. So you have us spending the money, but it's staying in the capital account. So we really aren't spending the money.
Right. So it's in it's the purchase of the 2 fire engines. That expenditure is projected as an actual expenditure in the current fiscal year, 2025. So it's in the capital expenditures on row 39 for 2025.
So that assumes we actually write a check and it goes out of our system in this year, even though that's not true.
Yes.
Okay. So okay. So I did overcount then. So I need to, in this, I would need to add back in the $2.2 million. Okay.
Is that standard accounting for that type of purchase?
Right. Since the district's already signed a contract and issued a purchase order, then we encumber the money, right? Because it's a legal obligation.
Okay.
So, right, and that's like governmental accounting. That's how it's done. So this forecast showing it as an expenditure, that's the same way to do it. It gets the money. It shows that fund balance is already spent.
And when I saw an article today about the backlog of fire apparatus, and when we contract for a price, even though we may not get it for 2 or 3 years, the price is set, right?
Correct, because we have a contract.
Well, but I think they actually did something really good, and they actually, I guess, did the math, and you agreed to the fixed price, and they gave you, I think less of a discount when you did that. But it turned out to be a good deal because it got delayed even more, and so it turned out to be good math. But they actually did the math to figure out whether it was a good deal to get it as a fixed price or a variable price, and they did the fixed price.
So I'm hearing that we have the money in the capital funds for the fire apparatus. Do we do the same for like Station 41 and Station 45? Do we already have money encumbered for those projects?
So for Station 45, the only obligation the district has made so far is the contract with the architect. So that's the only thing so far
That's
that
it.
we're legally obligated for.
That's it. And same with Station 41, we don't have any funds put away, anything like that already.
Correct. That's all at board discretion. The board has approved nothing for Station 41.
There is money some money in the capital account, the
Yeah.
capital fund that we have.
The fund,
But not
but not
that much.
specific.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mine is a general comment, I guess with a question. In 5 of the years in the forecast, we're reducing every year the general reserve fund. In other words, in a sense, where the red lines. And then if you're looking at the 2.5 assumption, you end up with about 4.7 million, a reduction in the general reserve fund. And it's below in 2 of the years, we fall below the 40%. But in a sense, most of the years other than 26, we end up basically below 50%. With the uncertainty in terms of like the pension fund, we're talking about, we can't say it's plus or minus X because we don't know. What we're going to find out every year will impact the go forward. And in a time of uncertainty, I just think it's not a good policy to budget and plan a reduction in the general reserve fund when we have no funds that basically are set aside for an event like the pension. I mean, that caught us, I remember, year and a half, 2 years ago, a real surprise, and it had a dramatic impact on that number on a go forward basis. I mean, in some of the periods, it's almost double what we're using in the historical numbers. So I think I would like to understand if we had to maintain the reserve at a reasonable level, not necessarily putting aside money because don't have it to put aside. But what would we have to, or what would we look to as what we would eliminate or not spend? In other words, what line items, 3 or 4 items, would we reduce or eliminate?
So John, so the spreadsheet that I sent, actually, you're going to hate even more if you didn't like that one, because there's going to be another, I don't know, $10 million that we're going to be out for building 45 than we currently forecast. And that puts a big hole in those.
45, 41.
I'm sorry to say 45, 41. Thank you. So that's going to reduce and whether it's in the capital fund or the general fund, we still earn interest on it, and it's, money's money. I realize, because we transfer a whole bunch of money out of the general fund into the capital fund as we need it anyway. But the sum of those two needs to be some reasonable number. And if we're going to spend $20 million-ish to build 41 instead of $10 million, which is what's in the forecast at the moment,
Another 10 million.
it's going to take those numbers down to, even if you minimally fund the capital fund, in other words, you just leave just barely a positive balance every year, it brings that number that you're talking about down to about 24%.
Yeah.
Later. So it's a challenge. Now we do end up, we've been putting a bunch of money into the both the OPEB trust, which I don't think we really have a choice on, and into the pension rate stabilization. And that's the thing you're worried about. That's the biggest variable thing we have out there, is that they can change those rates quickly, or they could change the need quickly and how much they charge. So we currently have about 14 or $15 million in that fund.
Correct.
Yeah. So that adds up a lot, and we're funding it to the tune of a couple $1.5 million or $2 million a year plus interest. So by the time we get there, we'll have closer to $20 million in that fund, which that's a different buffer that we have.
But so I think coming back next month, I would just like a guideline in terms of, if we set a policy of not reducing, what would we look to of what we would reduce or eliminate priority wise?
And I think we're going to get into that with the next budget item. We have a list of what's discretionary, basically. If I understand correctly, it's asking what's discretionary. Because I think what's going on, the district only has so much money. I think of it as a pie. And it's up to the board and management to slice up the pie, right? So I think where we're at is to, as you just talked about, if you're going to put 1.5 extra into the pension trust every year and fund your OPEB every year and pay cash for Station 45 remodel and pay cash for fire engines and pay cash for a 41 remodel, there's not enough, and maintain a 40 to 50% reserve. There's not enough to do all that over the next 5 years. And that's why we're seeing those red numbers. So I think, that is the discussion and the policy for the board to direct what are the priorities? Is it the 40 to 50% reserve? Is it a station? Is it the pension trust? What determine the priorities for the district, and then the money should follow those priorities.
So I have another just general question. So we've all had a tour of the various fire stations, but there are all kinds of new safety things that happen to them and, things that can make them better. Do we currently forecast that there are on other than 41 and 45, are there things that we're going to need to have in the forecast in the, next 10 years? It's not in here now, but are there things that we think are going to be needed for those, or are they okay? Have we really thought through that, I guess is my question.
Yeah, so some of this we'll hear from our facilities chief, battalion chief Jerry Lee. So our annual budgets include things that we do on an annual basis. So things like, for example, if an apparatus bay door replacement. So I would include that in an annual budget. For the others, it would go to the existing pre-conforming standards. And then there's always something that may come up as we learn. In the pre-1980s, we had popcorn ceilings and we painted with different layers of paint. And as we now know, things have changed over the years, and as science and discovery has developed. So there's nothing that I am aware of currently, but certainly our practice is to provide facilities for staff and firefighters that adheres to the safety of our personnel. And we will stand by that. That's our obligation to our employees.
Yeah, I would, looking at the current year's annual budget for 26, and I don't remember any of the other years where it's exceeded $100,000 for any of the other stations. But it's things that needed fixing or whatever. So we've not spent because of budgetary items, because it's nominal.
Well, certainly, and that's our hopes, is that that things work the way that they should. But there's always, as we know with our own homes, there's things that we cannot account for, such as a large plumbing leak that we went through maybe a decade ago at Station 45. So we certainly hope that things work as they should. But again, many of these buildings are commercial size. They're used every day, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, and support community events in the station. So they get used heavily, and that's what our budget reflects. And certainly we hope that we don't need that extra money.
More comments? Oh, sorry. Anybody else have any more comments, questions, discussion? But I think we said we might want to come back to this after we went through the budget itself. So can we kind of, Mr. Lawyer here, can we just hold this for a while until we, instead of closing out on it, can we hold it for a while until we come back after the budget discussion?
Yeah, you can. You just move on to the next item, and then we can return to this item if you'd like.
And then
But yeah, we do have a public comment issue, so
Right.
I think maybe we should take
we should do
public
the
comment
public comment.
now.
That's great. So,
And
right. So do we have any public comment on the long-range financial forecast?
No, it's fine. So public comment is open. Go ahead. And if you can just state your name for the record.
Will do. Good afternoon. Jacob Arola with the Moraga-Orinda Firefighters, IFF Local 1230. I'm a representative. I first want to thank staff and chiefs and everyone for all their hard work in creating this document. These are not easy to do, and it's appreciated. I just had a couple questions and then maybe some comments. It was mentioned that the AV growth is paid for by a contracted company that comes up with their best guess. Is that fair, accurate statement?
Yes, correct.
Okay, and they're usually fairly close to what those AV growths when they're determined in July.
Yes.
Okay. With respect to the ambulance fees and strike team revenue, where did those numbers come from?
I guess I think I just went board direction. Do you want this?
So we normally, I think actually speakers are only allowed to speak to the board.
Oh, sorry.
So
Confirming, sorry, to the board then.
So I would
Okay,
I
I
would-
guess I'm asking
so-
the question, then you guys can.
yeah, so I would say
That-
it's
that was just
okay
my
that-
Question is, where did those numbers come from?
So maybe can you tell us where the numbers for the ambulance fees came from? I see that they've gone up significantly from the last couple of years.
Okay, so the ambulance fees, right, recently the district completed the fee study with Matrix Consulting and changed and updated our ambulance fees. So so for the new budget fiscal year 2026, that is based, the ambulance fees are based on, we are assuming that we're going to get more ambulance fees because of the fee study and the rate change. And then we are projecting a 1.5% increase in the future years. And that's consistent with the assumption from last year's forecast.
Same number, same busyness, same number of runs, but higher rates going forward. In other words,
Yes.
And strike team revenue seems pretty consistent after for the next years. Wherever it was, right? Oh, up here.
it's like
Yeah, it seems-
$250,000 a year. Yeah.
You know, somewhere between 222 and, you know, out to 300,000. How do you arrive at that number? Is it a factor, a percentage? Or?
So the strike team revenue is, if I looked at the last 3 years and the last 3 years, it netted to 252,000. And granted, the strike team revenue in the long range forecast is net of the overtime cost. So this is the profit that's showing in here effectively. So the last 3 years, the low was 252,000. So I used 222,000. So again, trying to be conservative, right? It's probably a little lower than what it will be, but and then it grows at 5% to mirror the salary increase in the MOU.
Wow.
And then after that, it grows at 3.5% throughout, which mirrors the salary assumption in the long range forecast.
And we went over this a couple of years ago, I know, and we had looked over a longer period of time than even the last few years. And I think at the time we weren't forecasting just the profit, but it was a number that's consistent with this, I think. So it sounds like a reasonable number to me.
Sure, thank you. So just to confirm, it's a consultant that does the ambulance and it's trending.
No, we do the ambulance. We do the ambulance forecasting. All they did is help us figure out the rates we could charge for the services we provide.
Okay. Respectfully, so those are essentially best guess of what could be happening.
Everything in this investment.
Yeah.
Yeah, got it. Just a quick comment too on the ambulance fees. I think that's been modified to now reflect, we have a lot of out of district transports, personnel that maybe can't afford to the transport or are concerned about it. And having that fee adjusted and having these other options for those that maybe are low income or unable to pay out of pocket is appreciated by the firefighters. I just want to thank you for making those modifications. My comment would be, I am concerned about the variance in what is projected here versus what may be done based on assumptions and kind of board knowledge. Interest rates were brought up, right? Hey, this is what we hear might be happening in the markets. I would request on behalf of the firefighters, at least, and maybe the public in general, that we just defer to GovInvest or at least have some stability in what we're utilizing, because there can be a dramatic variance as the board changes over time, how these projections are done. It just so happens this board is very well versed in finance. Another board may not be. And then if they're just doing the same thing, it leads to a lot of inaccuracies and it makes it difficult to follow trends. And again, the variance of projections versus the reality of where things are going to be. If that is the case, and interest rates are going to plummet and our T-bills are going to go away and down to 1.5%, it may be worth considering for some of these capital expenditures to then borrow like we have for 43, where it's very cheap money to borrow at that point. And so the $10 million over time becomes a lot easier to handle versus having to pay in cash.
But it's not cheap right now. So
It's cheaper to be in contract for the construction costs and then finance it over time should the interest rates drop.
well, if they drop,
But that's
But
what
only
the
if you-
was, right?
only if you, but when the rates actually drop, then you have to wait till that time till you actually, otherwise you're taking the risk that they don't. You can't have it both ways.
Well, that's kind of what it sounds like. It's like our projections are saying, hey, everything's going to crash and these interest
Well,
rates
the
are terrible. But
projections
should
aren't
that
saying-
happen,
The,
our cash wouldn't need to be spent.
the projections are saying that the interest rates are coming down. That's not crashing. Interest rates coming down is a good thing. Okay, that means the market gets better. The stock market gets better. That's where all your money's invested.
But inflation can still go up.
It's it's an indicator of inflation, which means it's low, not high. So the interest rates going down is a good thing for all the model, not, it means you earn a little bit less on the amount of cash you have around, but that's the best news you can have for all the rest of the costs and everything.
It would be helpful if we could see the unrestricted revenues in a percentage form of the total budget as well as unrestricted, just so we can follow along with the board policy of having the 40, 50%, those goals and stuff and kind of where we're at. So it's just a number form, but you have to do a lot of math to figure out what those numbers are as in relation to percentage. So that's just something I'd ask what we add to it kind of down there in line 57 and 60. And then a comment was made that the pension stabilization fund and the OPEB are obligations.
No,
And I don't
That's
think
not what
they
I said.
are, right? Okay, I just want to make sure. I might have misheard.
Yep.
I just want to confirm.
the OPEB is an obligation you have to make, yes.
The
and the
payment to
pension-
OPEB, but
Yes.
the trusts are not, right? So if there needed to be a halt on those investments,
The trust is the payment to OPEB. But we have to have an OPEB trust. Everybody has one.
you have to have it. You don't have to fund it.
Don't we have to fund it? It seems to me you do.
The OPEB trust doesn't have to be funded. You could go pay as you go, but of course there are a lot of reasons why, because of the GASB changes that occurred starting about 10 years ago, why almost everybody is funding. It's different than pension because pension essentially requires pre-funding because not CalPERS, Cesera in your case requires it. There's literally no funding for the retiree health other than the 115 trust. So it's not legally mandatory. You could go pay as you go, but it would be really irresponsible.
So I think years ago, 8 years ago or so, the board went through all this, and that's the reason we formed the trust. And as far as I know, everybody has one of those. All the districts have these things, and the policy on all of them is to fully fund them.
I think the concern was, which we've always had an issue with Saris, is the unanticipated lack of funding to meet the obligation. And the last thing you'd want to have happen is say, oh, so sorry, we can't meet this obligation. And then all of a sudden, what we did is looked at the unfunded pension liability, and now in certain years, it's not got better. And that's the thing that has driven the increase in cost of the pension obligation on an ongoing basis because it's underfunded. And the fund is there in case for any reason we couldn't pay it or they can't pay to meet the obligation. The money's there to do it.
Well, that's for the pension trust.
Correct. Yeah. And again, last comment, I recognize Cesara is always going to be underfunded, right? The district will always have an obligation to make up that difference. It's very frustrating. It's a great idea that we have a quote unquote rainy day fund to augment those unanticipated numbers when they ask for it. And it sounds like it may be approaching that time. I would just say I think of it as a rainy day fund, and there's kind of two steps to it, right? We could save money by not contributing to the rainy day fund. And then we have the option to even borrow from the rainy day fund should it begin to rain.
You can't borrow from the fund.
It's borrowing. We can use that money to pay the fund, right? When those bills arrive, that's what that account is for, is to pay the money towards Cesara bills.
There was one year where they shot up to
It was about a $5 million change in 1 year.
$5 million
That happened in
more than
2008 or 9, maybe
and
12.
we'd been paying 3 million, 5 or 4 million, and now all of a sudden it was looking at 10. We didn't have to at the time, but that would have been a time when we could have, had we needed. But at the size of the fund, you couldn't only cover completely 1 year or 2 years right currently. And so it's,
Yeah, that wasn't the time to borrow it then.
yeah.
It's there should it need to be done or there's a drastic change. That's all my comments. Thank you.
Thanks.
More comments from anyone?
Yeah, do we have other public comments?
I'm checking. And so we do not have any more hands raised and we've not received written public comment.
Well, I appreciate Captain Rowland's comments because I now have a lot of questions and comments in response to that. One of which is, again, being new to the board for the first 2 years, I have not been on the board when we've issued a bond. When I hear
We don't issue bonds, we just have debt, and there's a difference.
we have debt and that's a difference. So the debt that we got for 43 was at a 2.2% interest rate? Is that
It's at 2.14%.
2.14%? In today's market, that's free money. I can't imagine we can touch that. But the blessing and the curse of having a board that is concerned about interest rates, and there's a whole bunch of interest rates. What's the time what are the pros and cons of looking into a similar debt type financing for either 41 or 45 or part of both? And what's the gap between the amount of, when we actually put into motion such a request and when we actually find out what that interest rate is? Because I'm guessing that we'd all be tempted by a 2.14% rate if we could get it today. And we all think that probably we couldn't get anything less than double or triple that now. Is that a fair assumption?
Sure. And the interest rate environment, when that was taken out since 2007 or
20,
so, well, since
17.
2007, interest rates have been, treasury rates have been, in fractional percentages. I mean, they're short-term treasuries, super low rates. So what we were paying roughly, more than we could have gotten on the short-term treasury market, which we're currently invested in for that money. So the question is, why would we want to borrow money at more than we can earn on the money that we have in the bank?
Right, right.
So, and today, you can't borrow at that rate.
Understood. The other question I have for whether it's Glorianne or anybody else is that with regard to the strike team revenue, do we break that out by employee? In other words, when Jacob or Lucas or Dennis Rain are assigned to mutual aid and we have strike team revenue, is there a way of finding out for each employee how much revenue, strike team revenue is generated?
So how the
Yes,
strike
no?
team works is that we have we file with the state on at least an annual basis and often more than once a year. It's based on our actual cost of our employees by position. So basically we take all of the captains and we take their hourly rate and then we get an average of that. And then we have to file that average with the state. And so if you're a captain, it's certain around engineer, firefighter, et cetera. So it depends on your job position. And then whatever is on file with the state, then that rate is what they reimburse us at, basically.
Well, it's by position, not by person.
Right. So that it's not, you can't do a computer search to find out what it is per employee, but you could reconstruct after the fact based upon the amount of time that a particular employee put in as to how much we billed and were reimbursed.
By
Could we?
person, you mean? Or,
Right.
I mean, that would be a lot of work. We
It
don't
would be a
track it
lot of
by
work.
person.
We
No.
probably, yeah, I could see why we wouldn't want to do it, except for a particular instance. All right, thanks.
Any more questions? So any more public comment?
We do not have any more public comment.
So we will put this aside for a while and move on to the second item on the agenda, which is 3.2, the public budget workshop. And we have about an hour left in our meeting, so.
I need you to go a little bit closer to the microphone.
All right.
Sorry, thank you.
And members of the board, my name is Carol Atwood. I'm interim administrative services director. I was brought in to help Gloria Ann over several months, primarily to do the budget. I'm a CPA, used to work with KPMG, and then I went into government. I've been in government for over 40 years, the last 30 of which at a department head level. So I thank you. This has been a fun project for me, and your staff has been wonderful. And I will say that kudos to your staff. They approached the budget a little differently this year. The chief and deputy chief and myself met with all of your budget managers and reviewed their proposals. We looked at the last 3 years of trends to see if the proposals needed additional funding or could be cut. But most of them were pretty right on, I have to say. There are a lot of asks, obviously, with the facilities and the apparatus this year, which we will need board direction on that. And then the chief and deputy chief went back to the budget managers and explained just what had happened to their budget. So there's a lot more ownership, and I think that's great. The more transparency you can have, the better. So I'm going to walk you through a higher level and then dive down a little bit into the revenues and how we came with those numbers and the overall expenditures. And then you get the treat of having the budget managers actually address you as well, so that you can get a better flavor for what they do on a daily basis and why their budget's changed. So with that, next slide. Thank you. We are in the first of several processes for your budget. This is your budget workshop. In May, we will ask if there's any additional direction from yourselves and from the public, and we will hope that you will adopt the proposed budget. And then in June, we hope that you adopt the final budget, although statutorily you do have until October 25 to adopt. Okay. So a big overview here. Your general fund budget, general fund revenues are, I would say, conservatively estimated at $40.6 million. And expenditures for salary and benefits, your largest, it constitutes about 89% of your budget, is $33.4 million. Totally reflects all of your MOU obligations. It does project for full staffing. Because with the exception of your single paramedic program, you will be at full staff on Monday. So congratulations, it does happen sometimes. And operating expenditures, which is only about 12% of your budget, coming in at $4.4 million. It actually went down from the original 2005 budget. So congratulations to staff for working on that. The transfer to capital projects was your normal transfer plus some depreciation calculations as directed by the board last year. That's a little unusual in governmental accounting standard board accounting, but it is board prerogative if you want to start to reserve more for your capital project fund. And expenditures exceeded and transfers exceeded revenues this year by $104,000. That's what we're estimating. And I'm not too concerned about that because, as Director Georgian said, you're going to have some salary savings in there. Some of the expenditures won't be done because of timing or whatnot. And so I'm sure you're going to come in a positive year end. But in the meantime, it looks pretty good for all the asks that are in this budget. Okay, so for your general fund budget, the graph at the bottom is just property tax. Property tax represents like 87% of your revenue. So you really don't have that in your control. But it's good that you hire experts in the field to project. And we took their conservative estimate of 4%. If we were to take probably a more realistic estimate, it would have gone to 4.10% of an increase. But we wanted to keep with board consistency and go more on the conservative side. It does not filter in any new construction in the last 2 years, because sometimes that takes a while to hit the property tax roll and get the money to you. But there will be some additional money coming to the district based on that. The ambulance fees is right off of your fee study, which hopefully you'll adopt on Wednesday night. The consultants were looking at a 6% increase in ambulance fees. And to answer the gentleman's question, it does take into account the Medicare and Medicaid limits and insurance limits. So this is basically your 30% that can actually pay it. So we built that into the model. It's the best information we have right now. We also built in another charges for services of 78,000. That was your other estimate from the consultants for the other charges that you have. So we're right up to speed with what the board has seen with your fee study. Investment earnings. I actually did a cash flow analysis over the next year by quarter. I took the cash flows coming in, including the property taxes, because you have 2 major months where you have some big hits for property tax, thank goodness. And then I looked at your expenditure stream. I did put the expenditures for your capital projects for 41 and 45 towards the end of the fiscal year, because I know that it isn't easy to build anything, especially in California with regs. You're still very early into the process, and you don't even have a design concept, I don't think, on 45 yet, or 41, sorry. And so I look at that as cash flow starting to go out at the end of the year, not throughout the year or at the beginning of the year. And so the portfolio stays pretty healthy throughout the whole year. I also built in 3 Fed reductions of 25 basis points over the next year, and that's reflective based on what treasurers were paying a week and a half ago, less the 25 basis point layering throughout the year. And I was surprised that it came to 900,000, but it was a conservative estimate, I thought, as far as what I had put in. And obviously, if the board doesn't feel that's going to be something that will come to fruition, we can discuss it. But we did do a cash flow analysis. That was one of your requests last year at the budget workshop, so we thought we would include it. As far as strike team revenue, I went back 5 years and looked at trends, and we have had such bad fire years. It was a huge amount of money. So I went back 10 years, and that's what we've adopted. And even then, you only have like 3 years of good fire years. You guys are doing a great job as far as fuel mitigation. And I mean, you're doing things my dad did on a ranch with fire breaks and everything else. But unfortunately, that's not the case throughout California. And I just don't know if that trend's going to go away. So we based it on 10 years to be a little bit more conservative, but to still realize that California has very bad fire seasons, and we may be incurring those costs. Okay, next slide. Okay, expenditures. As I said, about 89% of your expenditures are salary and benefits. These salaries and benefits go with your MOUs. There's a 5% salary increase. Health insurance went up 9% across the board. Obviously, with the retirement contributions and your pension rate stabilization fund, those numbers just seem to skyrocket. But your employees are very lucky that this board has decided to contribute to a pension rate stabilization fund and to these obligations, because it ensures some benefits that they get later in life. And so I think that's very admirable. It also does reflect the implementation of the single role ambulance staffing plan, which was directed this last March. I think that is an exceptional way to lower your retirement percentages by almost 60%, going from a safety position to a non-safety position, both for Classic and PEPRA employees. It's great. And I know it was negotiated, but I think it was very strategic on your part, because those are big dollar amounts that you're having to face. You may not see it right away because you still are incurring that overtime, although it did go down. We projected 200,000 less in regular overtime and 300,000 less in strike overtime within this budget. So it's conservative, but we did anticipate some of that overtime going down with the creation of the single role ambulance staffing. So you've put into place some really good strategic plans, and I have to commend you for that. Unfortunately, when you're talking about 89% of your budget base, it's hard to manipulate too much. So I just wanted to point that out. Operating revenue of 4.4 million. That actually went down 3.5% from your original budget that you had in fiscal year 25. So again, kudos for your staff. They did a really nice job of not asking for too much money. I worked for an agency once where public safety went out and bought so much toilet paper the very last fiscal day because they thought they'd lose their office supply budget, and then they didn't have any place to store it. So I didn't see anything like that here, which was great. Next slide. Okay, this is your employee count. And so the biggest thing here, because the rest is pretty status quo, it does include your 2 positions that you approved last year, your deputy fire chief and your office specialist. It transfers 9 positions out of emergency operations into emergency medical services for the way you've directed with the ambulance program. And all the emergency medical services also includes 3 interns, which I know you're fairly familiar with because you just discussed it in March. So this kind of gives you a better feel for where your staffing is being targeted. I also want to say we did do full staffing. In my experience, you do full staffing because government is quirky and it doesn't follow for-profit or FASB guidelines. That's why we have a Governmental Accounting Standards Board. So what you're trying to do is match your contractual obligations, what you've said you're going to do in your MOU, and what you've authorized staff to hire in the same year that you are budgeting for. So similar to the fire engine scenario, we have them in 25, fiscal year 25. We're not going to get them for 4 years. But in the capital projects for government, and I know it's quirky, you encumber those funds. You've signed that letter that gives you that price, which is good also. But then you take those funds out of that available and spendable fund balance because they don't want you to have to somehow forget and spend it again. So they're trying to protect you, and where those funds are sitting, it's not out of cash. It's out of a liability for the future, and it's reserved in your fund balance. If you look on your annual comprehensive financial report, it's going to say reserve for encumbrances. So it's taken it out of your general checking account, so to speak, and put it in a savings account to buy the apparatus 4 years from now. And then where you will see it hit your cash flow statement is 4 years from now when you buy it and actually have it delivered. It'll hit the cash flow statement. You'll be able to see the sources and uses of funds go in and out. And again, it's hard to wrap your head around, but it's all based on this available spendable policy, because they try to get the budget in there and really make sure that you're not spending those monies twice. So next slide, please. Okay, non-discretionary expenditures are a lot of your budget. So you have salaries and benefits, operating expenses, workers' comp insurance, retiree health insurance, and unemployment insurance that are non-discretionary. And that's about 80% of your total expenditure. So again, not a lot of wiggle room for you to really cut. Next slide. But we put together a list of things that you could cut if you decided to not continue the effort that you have right now. And quite frankly, I'm very impressed. I at times have wished I didn't live in Santa Clara County because I hear what you guys do for your residents, and it's wonderful that you have chipper services and home hardening grants and mesh for the gutter guards. We don't get all that stuff for free where I live. So it's great. But although I don't think you want to cut any of these, if you had an inclination to cut, we have identified a list. As we've talked about before, the pension rate stabilization trust fund contribution you could cut. I wouldn't recommend it. I think it's a very prudent and wonderful thing to do for that outstanding liability, and for agencies that didn't fund it appropriately over the last 20 years. They're kind of up a creek without a paddle right now. So you want to keep that healthy and funded. You do have fuels mitigation staff that you could cut, but again, it's a great community service. I wouldn't recommend. I know that the deputy fire chief position, I'm so sorry it's up here. I'll apologize to you right now. But I know that the way the contract was written, you could go back and not have that. So we had to list it. Home hardening grants, you aren't spending $500,000 a year. I was projecting you'd spend about 400,000 this year, which has been growing by leaps and bounds. But if that's what this board wants to do, that's what we need direction from you on, to see if you want to keep it at that level or if you wanted to cap it. I'm just going down some of the list. But I think they're all good things. I mean, we're trying to beef up training. We are trying to beef up technology and getting everybody on the same Microsoft Office 365 license, so your people can actually get onto a Teams meeting and function instead of jump over to Zoom. I mean, things like that I think the district would really want to do, and also beef up public information with your website. But we'll come back to this list. Okay, so for the general fund overview, these are the significant differences this year. And again, we've talked about most of them, but we just wanted to let you know where your real increases have hit hard on your budget. And it's mostly in that salary and benefits category. Next slide. Capital projects, and Deputy Lambert's going to get into this later in the presentation. You have a lot of asks here, but I will tell you that last week you had 5 apparatus out of service, and I saw a lot of people scrambling to try to make sure that they could deliver emergency services to your constituents, and they had to move apparatus around. So it is a real dilemma right now, plus the fact of delivery timelines. So the budget proposals came in based on what they felt they needed. But again, we need board direction. As far as your remodels on your stations, when you ask what the benefit is of going with debt service, the benefit is what's called intergenerational equity. The station's going to last for 60+ years. If you do debt, the future constituents are funding that debt over the life of that asset. And if you still want to keep your reserves up, maybe you do have to consider debt. I know you guys are not fans of it, but it is something that you might want to look at. And I know the interest rates are all over the map right now. I heard there was a 50 basis point swing just in one day last week. So there's no visibility whatsoever. But if you did decide to debt finance those stations, because it's going to be a huge number between the two, you can always pay it off early. And if the interest rates go back down again, because usually they're like this, I remember the 1980s when they were way up there. You watch for those opportunities and you have staff bring it back to the board when you think you can refinance or pay something off. So just planting a seed there, because I don't think you want to finance your apparatus. So you could maybe keep your reserves at a decent level, pay as you go on your apparatus, but think about other ways to maybe finance the stations. And that's my 2 cents based on my experience. Next slide. Okay, so what's going on with all of your available and spendable fund balances? That's That's the term they like to use in government. You're actually going to grow by about 1.1 million over this next fiscal year. At least that's what's projected. You'll probably grow by more than that because you won't spend 100% of your budget. A short deficiency right now projected for the general fund of $100,000. CIP, $2.2 million, but then your pension funds, they're going up. So you're still actually putting money into the system. And again, this is available spendable balance. So it actually looks really good compared to a municipality right now. Next slide. So I get to do what I call the easy divisions, and I will start. The board of directors division is pretty status quo. There's a change in the number because you have biannual elections, so $16,000 is not budgeted for this next year, but we've put in for new microphones in case we can't be in this facility and you need to have a way to communicate. And so that's been rolled over from the current fiscal year to next fiscal year. We didn't spend it, we're just rolling it over. Finance and administration, excuse me. You will decrease the temp help, that's me, now that you're fully staffed. And this is what happens when you need to have readers. And your professional services is actually going down. You won't have a fee study to pay for, and you won't have a negotiations going on with your labor unions. So that actually decreased. And it more than offset the increase in your property and liability insurance increases, as we're all feeling at home as well. HR, we have increased health insurance, as I talked about, at 9%. Your pension rate stabilization fund payments and your workers' comp increases were the bulk of that trend. IT, we're looking at computer software increases, including a records management system and getting everyone on Microsoft Office 365 and some web enhancements. And for your tunnel grant program, we have ended that grant as of March of 25. We're going to ask board direction to transfer the residual, which is about $726,000 into the general fund. You've done that in the past. And so we're assuming that you're going to do it again. You have discretion on where you want to put it, but we like consistency in finance. So we've decided to put it in the general fund for now. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Casey Irving, and she's going to talk about fire prevention.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
That was
Well
a
done.
great presentation, and I appreciate your efforts.
Well done. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, directors. Casey Irving, Fire Marshal. The fire prevention budget reflects a focus on education, engineering, and enforcement. For the education portion, there was an increase from $9,000 to $24,000. This is due to the need for community-wide education of the new fire hazard severity maps and the pending implementation of Zone 0 regulations. We are looking to enhance our outreach by implementing the use of marketing professionals to run our social media and update our website. We will also continue to promote awareness of the Home Hardening Grant Program. Since the LA fires, there was a significant increase in participation in the program this year. For the budget items pertaining to engineering, dues and memberships were reduced from $8,000 to $3,000 to reflect a more accurate spending. Budget items pertaining to enforcement were adequate, so no changes were made. Last thing to note is that fire trail grading was downgraded from $25,000 to $10,000 due to some collaboration with Contra Costa County Fire. They're going to assist with the maintenance of some of the trails. Do you have any questions? Yes.
So what kind of, we currently have some outreach and public, we spend money on education, public education. So we want to go higher, because I know the city of Orinda has professionals that they've hired to do sort of thing for the fire prevention work. Can we just coordinate with them and use some of their, leverage the communications that we're having that's all talking about the same topic with those folks instead of creating our own wheel and doing it separately?
Sure, that's an option we can entertain.
Because I think, I don't know whether Lafayette does this. I know they're part of Confire instead of, but we all have an education in our general community that I think we're trying to get everybody educated about the same topics. And I'm all in favor of educating people. Don't worry about that. But I just think there's a lot, the city of Orinda has, I think, at least one full-time person. I think it's closer to 2 full-time people that just do this. So hopefully we can all say the same things and maybe jointly fund newspaper advertisements or whatever, so we can think about coordinating even more closely than we currently do.
Sure.
And there's a meeting this afternoon, as a matter of fact, that we can talk about that.
Okay.
So it starts at 6 o'clock, right next door at the city offices.
I think in March of next year, we're going to lose the grant funded positions.
Correct.
And, if we do end up we will implement the zone 0, at least for the very high severity zones. I think we're going to need to talk about probably additional staffing if we're going to want to really be able to enforce at some point, maybe mid-year might be a good time to additional grants or additional staffing, because if we end up doing it for the whole district, I think there's no way that our current staffing is going to be able to, that's my personal opinion, is our current staffing could not enforce it in the whole district. I mean,
So just to clarify, so our current staffing, which includes those folks, could, but I think, so you're really saying we want to at least maintain that at a minimum.
yeah, they're going to go away in March,
Right, but if they're next March, this March?
March 2026.
2026.
But if I guess the question is, do you want to have the staffing go up from what it is today? In other words, funding the grant people today plus more, or just the grant people?
I think that's for the fire marshal and the chief to decide, but
I generally agree with you.
yeah, I think that the staffing that we have without those two, it would be inadequate
I agree.
to enforce. I mean, we'd be able to do very minimal other work. I mean, I don't see how we could do it.
When
So
does that grant?
March, the two
March of 26.
positions go away in March.
26.
So it's 3/4 the way through our next
Alright.
year's budget.
Correct.
So do you have any money in here for replacing those grant people, or?
Directors, if I may, that is later in the presentation, one of the things that we're going to seek direction on is what would the board like to do with those 2 positions once they go away? Staff's recommendation would be to fund those 2 positions once a grant funding goes away. I believe having 5 fuels mitigation specialists is the right number. We start adding more than that, we start exceeding the span of control. We start needing more vehicles, more computers, more workspace. So I think we're at a good number with the fuels mitigation manager and 5 specialists, but we're absolutely going to be asking for direction on that.
And I know this would be very unpopular with our firefighters, but in other jurisdictions, some firefighters do some kind of fuels mitigation enforcement and inspections as well. So, we may have to talk about that. We've talked about it in the past, and maybe we have to talk about that again. So.
I think that'd be great.
Well,
But if you're looking for input now, I would agree with Director Danziger that anybody else want to comment on that? Whether you think keeping the current staffing, for the long term would be?
Again, I don't know whether now or later in our meeting today would be the appropriate time, but I would like to just throw out to both Fire Marshal Irving and Chief Isaacs, what is your strategy? Assuming that we take the position that the state is going to basically mandate a zone 0 for probably more than half of this community. Theoretically, should we decide to extend that to the entire community, what would be your strategy for enforcement? And that's assuming that this is at least over a 3-year phase-in period. Phase that in by neighborhood? Do we phase that? And what criteria would we use? And would that require the full five staff positions more, or could we do it with less?
All great questions, sir. Fire Marshal and I are putting together a plan once we know more from the state on the Zone Zero. They're holding the meetings right now. There's a lot of pushback, as you can imagine, to the regulations. It is possible the regulations could be relaxed a little bit. The Board of Forestry is saying go into effect January. So as we get closer to that, we will bring plans to the board with different options. Do we implement it in just the very high? Do we implement it district-wide? Do we do very high June 1, everybody else implementation type period? So yes, sir, we are looking at that and planning to bring multiple plans or ideas to the board for consideration on how we want to implement it. And staffing is going to be a part of that. So if we kept the current 5 specialists, could we set up a rotation where every property gets an inspection every 3rd or 4th year? And absolutely we can. What we've been focused on the last few years, evacuation routes and entry points for fire pathways to enter our community. Those have been the focus. But as things change, as we implement Zone Zero, we're going to have to go back to the drawing board and take a look at how we prioritize our inspections.
And I want to commend you because I know that for the first 3-hour meeting, both you and I were on that meeting remotely for the entire time. I was on the second meeting for half of the time, and I think you were on that for all of the time that I was on. And I'm guessing I speak for all of us. I'm still learning a lot from those board meetings. It is my assessment also that by the end of the year, they're going to mandate it.
Yes,
They'll
sir.
tweak the language. They will make some adjustments to what constitutes a Zone Zero, but I'm pretty sure it's going to happen.
I would agree with you, sir.
So I think just my comment about just how much staffing it takes. We've had 5 people for the last at least 2 years. And so in each year we're getting much less than a third of the district inspected. And I think we find that going back, when we do go back, they all need to be re-inspected anyway. It isn't like people, get the religion and figure out what they really need to do. They seem to forget very quickly. So the point is we need to inspect, a lot. And if those, if inspecting every 4 years isn't that great. So it seems to me we're going to need at least the amount of staffing. And this is going to be a lot harder to enforce than the other stuff was. It's going to be a lot of go backs and gee, thanks for sharing, but you didn't cut down the maple tree you needed to that was right next to your house or whatever. It's going to be and we're going to have a lot of time spent, just like we do with a few of the junipers, that took a lot of extra time because people were, wedded to their precious junipers. But it only takes a few to mess up the whole system. I mean, you have to go back and back and back. And I think we're going to need personally at least the staff we have today if we're going to enforce the new 5-foot, whatever new 5-foot rule it is.
But enforcement has to be targeted. And it seems to me that one of the things we do is we take the modeling that's already been done, predict where the high winds are going to be coming into our community from the peripheries in the north and the east, and focus on those very high fire hazard severity zones where we get the most bang from our buck from enforcement. And we emphasize voluntary compliance in, say, the non-zones and the moderate zones, maybe even the high zones, where we're not going to get as much bang for the enforcement hour. Does that make sense?
Except that sooner or later you have to be fair to everybody. You have to enforce it every place.
Right, but I think as in everything else,
As a priority, I agree, but sooner or later you got to inspect everybody.
I think that's true. But if you're talking about where you inspect in the first 6 months as to where you inspect after 2.5 years, then that would be one criteria, correct?
For sure.
Yes, sir.
Right, Glorianne, I think, is it in the after the first quarter or the second quarter, you do a budget adjustment?
So I've been doing quarterly financial updates, and then usually at the mid-year review is when we have a budget adjustment.
Okay. Because we could, if we wanted to proceed with what we have, and then if there's something comes up that dictates we will need or want to augment or whatever, or adjust, we could do that, the first budget adjustment.
But your assumption at the moment is that they go away? Is that what's in? the plan?
March 2020, they're scheduled to go away March 2026.
Yeah.
That's subject to board direction.
Are you fully staffed right now?
As of April 21st, I will be.
You, okay. And it's a moving target. It goes up and down and okay.
So I have another question. Those 5 fuels mitigation positions, they don't include Dennis Rain or Julie Sparks, who in effect are doing a great amount of their time is fire prevention, correct?
Correct.
So do we have any concerns about availability of working space for any of the additional 2 people there that are not technically in fuels mitigation, but are actually doing fire prevention?
It's my understanding that staff are kind of on a rotating basis for remote work and in person, but we do have an office or a room for our fuels mitigation specialists and the manager.
We had talked at least a little bit about the idea of having an extra temporary office space until we get admin figured out, with the 41 redo. Is that in the budget anyplace?
That is not in the budget, sir. We're still trying to figure out if we had space in the back without impacting the training grounds and how we could move some trailers back there, wire, get electricity back to them, the IT. But yes, we're still looking at it.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry. And so we're going to need more public outreach, public information. At some point, I assume you're going to have to come to us with a plan of what that's going to be.
Yes.
I mean, some of the suggestions of working with Orinda or other. And we've done a lot. I mean, the signs that I see around town, the BART station banner, I mean, that was all good effort. So,
Yep. Great.
okay.
More questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Now we're on to fire risk reduction.
Good afternoon, directors. This was the grant funded positions that we were just talking about, where we were seeking direction for those 2 positions for the specialists.
So this one was supposed to give them directions. Sure.
Yeah.
We need to, we have 2 people that think yes. We have 3 more people.
Yeah, but I think we can, I think, I mean, for right now, they're funded through March, so I think we could address that at the halftime, however you call it?
Mid-year.
Mid-year,
Except that
yeah.
we also has to go on the long-range financial forecast eventually.
That's true. So
And I don't personally, I mean, it might be interesting
Yeah.
this year, but I can't imagine we're going to want less people.
Oh, I
than what
agree.
we're
I
in
agree.
Zone 0, so.
yeah, so I think the direction would probably be to continue it, to add it in.
That's what I would
Right.
say.
Same here.
I'm hearing, I'm seeing yes, so.
That's a whole ounce
That's
of
perfect.
prevention,
We'll-
pound of
we'll
cure
plan on
thing.
that.
Yeah. Do we have an?
Director Hassler.
Sure. Do you have an opinion or
Oh, I think I agree we build it in. I agree with everybody else that we should build it in.
okay, there's your direction. Next.
Preparedness.
Good evening, directors. I'll be presenting on behalf of Emergency Preparedness Office Specialist Julie Sparks. And in essence of time, I'm going to shorten some of my presentation. This budget includes objectives to include support and liaison with law enforcement for community evacuation planning, implement and update public education programs, as we heard from our fire marshal, with local schools and community events, improve advertisements for home hardening grant opportunities. This budget has been reduced $17,675 from previous fiscal year due to redistribution of program funds into fire prevention where public education is held, in addition to a separate breakout for prescribed fire. Pending any questions, this concludes my report.
Great, thank you.
So let me just get it straight. This is Julie Sparks' new hire this fiscal year, and she coordinates the CERT program. So I know we've talked about this before. Do we supply all the funding to coordinate that program for La Morinda?
Yes, sir, that is correct. There was, several years ago, Lafayette did, pay the district, a portion of the salary, the emergency preparedness, coordinator salary when they also did prescribed fire, and it was all wrapped into one. They stopped paying that. There was an agreement with, then Chief Winokur and the Lafayette Police Chief where MOFD would receive staff time from one of their employees for technical computer, or not really IT stuff, but repeater. And it was a great benefit to the district to receive that help to do the stuff that he was doing. He has since moved on, left Lafayette PD and went to the East Bay Regional Park District law enforcement. So we are not receiving any of that. One of the other directions we want from the board is it appropriate for MOFD to be funding the CERT program for the city of Lafayette? Now, our CERT program is a wonderful program. This is not meant to be disparaging to our volunteers or the program administrators. It is a great program staffed with some really wonderful people. But as your fire chief, I need to ask, is it our job to fund a program in a city outside our jurisdiction? So happy to take direction and, seek guidance on that.
Has there been any discussion with Con Fire or Board of Supervisors, Candace Anderson, about getting some funds to continue that program, or?
There hasn't, sir. Before I reached out to them, I wanted to seek some direction because we are the host or the sponsoring agency.
What would be helpful? What would our ask be? We'd go to the city council of Lafayette and say, hey, we'd like X number in a cash contribution toward defraying the expenses of the employee that we're, paying over $100,000 a year for. We asked for, I think we're already getting free space at the Lafayette Community Center for one of the 2 training sessions, 9 weeks, 4 hours a night, without charge, right? Are we also getting time from Duncan Siebert, who is a Lafayette resident and who might or might not continue if we withdrew and had a Moraga-Orinda CERT program? So number one, what would our ask be? And maybe we have other board directors. I mean, I have no objection to going to some of the other agencies and saying, hey, what are you willing to kick in? It's a great program for you. But on the other hand, I'm not sure we have any cost savings if we basically contract into a Moraga-Orinda CERT program. We're still depending upon, in an earthquake or a wildfire, the voluntary efforts of hundreds of Lafayette residents who we've trained over the past 12 years. So I think we get a benefit from that. It might not be a tangible benefit today, but it certainly is a valuable benefit at some point. So I'm not convinced there's cost savings by pulling out. Anybody disagree?
I don't think we've necessarily said pull out, so I'm not sure you have to go in with both the carrot and the stick. Pull out being the stick. But, just to be fair, I mean, why should we be providing a service to them versus the people in Berkeley or San Francisco or wherever? Just because they happen to be our neighbors is interesting, but they have a fire department too. So I think we definitely should go ask and say, look, here's the costs we're spending, on this program. And if you guys want to keep being part of the program, you should pay this. I think that just makes sense.
I think that I have no problem with that at all. I just don't want to, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with an express or implied threat that we're going to pull out the stick if they don't pull up. I guess that would be the distinction between, are you suggesting that we What kind of stick do we use if they don't like the carrot?
You know what? I would, looking at this number here, I would ask them for a third
Yeah, I would too.
and see what they, and I
Well, and,
get,
and you could barter. I mean, we already did the barter thing. That's great.
Yeah,
It doesn't have to be cash. It can be, we want X services from your police department, or we want whatever,
they may say, like the Director Romer said, they may say, well, you're using our facility with no cost.
Well, and
We
they're
could,
using
they
ours
do the
too, so-
classes here too, so they do them other places. I didn't do, when I did cert, I didn't do it in Lafayette.
Uh-huh.
I think I did it, where did I do it here maybe? I didn't do it in Lafayette. I can't remember. I think it was here.
I would also be open to being very creative in negotiating with them.
Okay.
In other words, I'm not sure that if they said $33,000, I'd go, great, take it, write me the check today. But if they propose that they want to dedicate a employee that they're going to pay to do enforcement all along Upper Happy Valley, all along the border of Orinda and Moraga, Dave Winokur used to tell us all the time, just, 3/4 of a mile from my home, when you transition from Glorieta to Acalanes, that's an upward canyon that could potentially be a huge source of fire into our community. And if we could point out that that is a priority for us, if they're not willing to pony up $33,000, what are they willing to do to establish home hardening and defensible space and zone zero within half a mile of every border of Moraga-Orinda? I mean, that's the distinction between us and Berkeley. We have a border with them. We have a fire ladder that if we're enforcing the most stringent standards in the state and they are not, we don't get bang for our buck. And that might be worth a lot more than
I think
$33,000.
there are lots of things we could barter. So talk to the police department, talk to the city council, talk to whoever you need to talk to.
Or maybe what it would be is maybe if you bring something to us on a future agenda,
Yep.
then we can approve it, and then you can go with them and say, my board requested this, and this is what they asked for. Maybe that would be instead of
I
just
think
opening it
I
up.
think I'd ask for a third and then see how would they want to fill that gap? How do they,
Right.
what service can they provide that looks something like a third?
Right. I think our,
Service-
partnership is very, very valuable, and I don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Yeah, but
Steve and I have both taken CERT training. I think we can both acknowledge that 9-week, 36-hour training was invaluable. It sticks with you for life. And we've got hundreds of people in this community, including Lafayette, who have taken that training. So I would rather keep the program. I would rather open a conversation in which we encourage any and all reciprocality with regard to fire prevention, and see what they say. I mean, the reasonable people with the same interests at heart as we do.
And maybe
I don't want to burn bridges.
Yeah, maybe we can get the numbers too. I mean, from CERT of how many Lafayette residents, however long they've been doing this program, have become CERT.
The point is that
Absolutely,
they used to
directors.
fund it. So all those historical people got funded, and now they stopped.
No, I
That's
understand.
the difference.
I don't disagree with you, Director Jorgens. I'm looking for contributions and increased motivation wherever we can find it.
Right.
But I want to encourage that. I don't want to,
Absolutely. I think we're all
I
saying.
don't
the
want,
Agreed.
I don't want to engage in, sort of turf wars.
same. Okay.
Yep, direction's clear, Director.
Okay.
I will come back with updates.
So what's
All right.
next? We're running on a short clock here. What's next?
Yeah.
Prescribed fire.
Try to make this super quick, directors, as we're running shorter on time. So what we did with the prescribed fire, we pulled this from the emergency preparedness budget. This is a halftime position. Dennis Rain is our prescribed fire coordinator. He does a wonderful job with all our pile burning with the large prescribed fire projects. You see the salary in there, his operating budget. To start out with is $7,400. assume there's probably going to be a little bit of tweaks in there for next year as we learn what's needed, what's not needed in his budget. Some of the asks from this budget were covered in other budget items like the drone program and stuff like that. It didn't make sense to have multiple drone programs. We have one drone program. If Prescribed Fire needs it, they can grab the drone and go fly it. If another program needs it, they can fly it. One of the other things about the salary and benefits included here is Dennis participates in the incident management team, the federal incident management team, a type 3 team. So a lot of this, he has overtime costs that gets reimbursed to the district for his time out of county.
I don't know whether this is the appropriate time, but I recall that at a prior meeting a few months back, Director Danziger asked staff whether every employee of the district who's eligible for retroactive pay had received it. And Dennis Rain, being the low-key person that he is, did not answer that apparently from July 1st to December 31st, he's short.
Yes, sir. We have this as a closed session
Oh,
item
okay.
for
I'm
Wednesday
sorry, I
night to
thought we were going
discuss.
to have a closed session, which is the only reason I brought it up here.
Not today.
Not
Yeah.
today.
Not today,
Okay.
sir.
I'm
It's on
sorry
for
if I
Wednesday.
brought it up inappropriately. I just didn't want to make sure. I was under the impression that we had a closed session today. So sorry about that.
Okay, next.
I just have one, I guess, a follow-up from what we just talked about previously. Do we ever do prescribed fire in outside of our district? So Tilden Park, outside of our district area, Lafayette,
Yeah.
anywhere else?
The agencies having jurisdiction there, if they ask for resources to help them, we will absolutely participate with them because they participate. We ask for help on some of our larger projects. So we do work with our partners on prescribed fire projects outside of the district boundaries.
Could we suggest that somebody do some in the Lafayette Reservoir area, which is like an accident waiting to happen on our border?
Yes, sir. We can, I'll reach out to our partners, both East Bay Mud and Confire, and engage with them on that discussion.
Right, because
We did one of these just a couple of years ago, just over on the other side of the reservoir, above the school, right? Capilindo Ridge. As we done, that was 2 years ago?
that was inside our district, right?
Oh, that was within the
The
district.
public
Okay.
won't be on the recording unless they come up to the podium.
That's-
If-
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry. Okay.
But I think that personally, I think that would, I mean, if we want to spend some great money on fire stuff, burning things that are, even if they're a little bit outside of our district, that are going to protect our district would be amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
More fun stuff to burn.
Right. And, this could, part
Part of the open discussion would be that sort, exactly that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Emergency medical services?
Good afternoon, Jerry Lee, Battalion Chief in charge of Emergency Medical Services and Support Services. For this coming fiscal year, FY 26, one of our major initiatives is to implement the new ambulance staffing deployment model to evaluate, update paramedic evaluation process, to update EMS station supply cache and to replace our EKG monitors on frontline apparatus. For salaries and benefits, our proposed budget is approximately $2.5 million. This is going to fund the new single role paramedic program that was directed by the board in March of 2025. This goes to fund 18 full-time positions and 3 interns. It's also important to note that we have transferred 9 positions out of emergency operations for this. In terms of the operating expenses, our proposed budget for FY 26 is $234,500. This reflects a slight reduction from the approved budget from FY 25 due to some reductions based on historic trends. Happy to answer any questions.
What I'd like to see, and it's not right now, but at some point, as we start transitioning to single role, I mean, part of this was not only to give better service to our district, but we were also looking at the cost of providing that service versus what the 9 firefighters were providing now. You just mentioned you're reverting 9 positions back.
Correct. So we transferred 9 positions out of the emergency
Right.
operations
So
budget.
what I'd like to see at some point, this is just some direction, as we, once we get the ambulance supervisor or when we have a report, I'd really like to see what the difference in the cost is. I don't really know. I'm hoping that it balances out, but this number that we're seeing here, 2.8 million versus what it was costing us before to staff the ambulance.
Okay. I think we did some of that last board meeting, but we can certainly do it again. That's great.
Sure.
We have some real numbers. I never saw this right there.
Okay.
So that's all.
Next slide. Support services, goals objectives for support services include provide administrative support for long-range facilities projects, seek alternative funding sources for facility improvement projects, update fire station equipment and furnishing, improve station security, update and improve exterior features. For the operating expenses for support services, it's essentially status quo, slight adjustments based on historic trends and inflation for a proposed budget of 26,200.
So this might not be where it is, but someplace it might have been the admin stuff, but you all use it. It looks like the Microsoft 360. So I don't know what, I haven't gone to look and see what it costs when you buy a whole lot of licenses, but I pay for it by the month for a business license. So it's the most extensive thing you can buy. It includes everything you could possibly get from Microsoft. And it's $14 a month. And if you do that times 50 people, it's not $17,000. So how do we end up with, and does everybody, they aren't all in the office at the same time. They don't have any common computers, or everybody has their own individual computer?
And before you answer, I just need to make an announcement. At 2:35, Director Hasler had to drop off for another meeting.
Okay.
So he has left the meeting.
Yeah, I'm going to turn into a pumpkin.
So that falls under IT.
Okay.
And we're coming up on that. So.
Okay, great.
Next slide. Now, for the operating and maintenance costs of our facilities and fire stations and buildings, again, it is essentially maintenance of efforts. The proposed budget for FY26 is based on historic trends from the last 3 years.
Given that we're now going to be remodeling and doing a lot of changes in there, are we stopping anything that, do we paint things, for example, if we're going to tear it all down, or are there any things that we know of that we're not going to need to do this year because we're replacing all of it?
At this point, no. This budget is for basic maintenance of our fire stations. There's nothing that was budgeted in the proposed budget that.
But is it maintenance or operating expenses?
It's both maintenance and operating expenses.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Emergency operations?
Directors, I'll be presenting on behalf of Battalion Chief John Bensley for the operations budget. Just a couple reviews of this budget. For objectives is to update our hazard mapping, continue to develop succession for our GIS program, which is managed by engineer Steve Rogness and has been thriving, and to improve mapping and record keeping. Continue to study products that can improve the safety and efficiency of tools that we use during emergency incidents. Of note, in this budget, we've decreased the PPE budget by $30,000 due to no anticipated hirings, a slight increase to the GIS support to reflect that succession planning for the GIS. Out of this budget comes many of our operating expenditures for tools, equipment, rescue equipment, extrication equipment, hose, nozzles, fittings, ladders, so forth. And I will note, this is also the budget that is drawn from for salaries and benefits from staff. And as we've heard from Mrs. Atwood, this includes the reduction to 48 personnel of line personnel. Any questions? This concludes my report for operations.
Questions, Ken? Okay, thank you.
Communications.
Directors, I'll be presenting again on behalf of Battalion Chief John Bensley for the communications budget. Of this budget, a couple of the highlighted objectives is to complete updated fleet-wide modems for all of our frontline apparatus, and continue the purchase of updated VHF radios for personnel as we've increased or the availability of these radios of new modern models. This budget also assumes approximately a 5% increase payment towards our communications contract for dispatch services through Contra Costa County Fire, and monthly payments for each of our eBricks radios, which are the green Motorola radios that are 800. That's where 800 megahertz. That's the JPA that we pay for the services for communications of our handheld radios. Pending any questions, this concludes communication.
Report.
Hearing none. Apparatus.
And last, directors, again, I'll be reporting on behalf of Battalion Chief John Bensley for apparatus, which is obviously much discussed tonight. This is our regular maintenance budget, maintenance and repairs. A couple of the highlighted objectives out of this budget is to continue to evaluate options for roadway safety and risk management, adjust long-range apparatus replacement plan, to accommodate extended build times of our apparatus. This budget supports maintenance and repairs of fleet vehicles, annual testing of our vehicles, pump testing that's required by NFPA, and annual service preventative maintenance. With the exception of a small increase to the tires that come out of this budget for our fleet, this budget remains relatively static from previous years. Pending any questions, this concludes my apparatus.
Does have any questions? So we have a number of pieces of equipment that are out of service at the moment, one of which got hit in a freeway a few months ago. And I know we were looking into buying a Caltrans truck, but the more things we have that go out of service, the more things we're still putting in harm's way on a freeway until we buy one of those things. And it seems like it's really, really hard to get them replaced. It seems to also be pretty hard to get them repaired even. So can we set a goal of like a month to buy the Caltrans trucks so that we don't keep putting our perfectly good workable equipment that's hard to replace in harm's way?
So just to be clear, so what we're seeing is it's unknown at this time, but we are seeing an extended time on parts and supplies for apparatus. And what once was the purchase of a Type 1 Pierce manufactured Type 1 in previous years, where you place the order and could be expected to be in your hands within 8 months. We're seeing 3 to 5 years or possibly longer. We don't know. There's some effects with the economy. There's tariffs with different countries. We're also seeing some kind of refractory from COVID, where we experience supply shortages, to include steel that we've gotten from outside of our country, and also labor shortages that we experienced from COVID. During that time, I think many of us thought that there would be a decrease in the purchasing of apparatus, in which case it was the opposite. There was an increase. So all of that for apparatus is, and in addition to the extended lifetimes that we've experienced of our fleet, where we previously had a 10-year replacement for Type 1 engines. We've extended that quite a bit throughout the years and dating back to the recession. There's a number of different things that we've experienced. So those parts are to include vehicles like what you're proposing as a blocking rig. So a power steering pump, for example, on our spare engine is what we are waiting on, hopefully to get back today, that we're waiting on that part to come. So that includes all apparatus, including some of the outfits that we're working to try and upfit for the fire chief vehicle. In terms of safety for roadways, I stand by the same response that I gave previously, and that's to control the flow and volume of our roadways. So I stand by that the best, most effective way to control the flow is to stop traffic and lean on our partners that have the jurisdictional authorities, which would be CHP for this incident or this instance for Highway 24, and then the other California responsibilities of roadways, which fall into Caltrans. We maintain communications with them. We engage in safe practices. Along with our training chief and operations chiefs, we're continuing to develop ways and thoughts and avenues to include rolling traffic safety blocks, which battalion chiefs are engaging to warn oncoming drivers of an incident upstream from the incident. So I stand by the way that to control and provide for the best safety of our employees while operating on roadways is to stop traffic, control the flow and volume of the traffic. A blocking rig is an alternative. However, we're looking at best practices, and with that additional apparatus, we would maintain that apparatus as well.
So I understand you have a philosophy that's a great philosophy. If you can, but until we can make that happen, we're still putting our perfectly good fire equipment at risk. It can't cost that much to buy a used Caltrans truck, $50,000, right? And do we currently have insurance on our vehicles, by the way, or are we self-insured?
So we're part of a joint powers authority for property and vehicle insurance. And so, right. So for instance, with the type 1 engine, we have a $10,000 deductible. So we'll pay $10,000 and then the JPA will pay for the cost of the repair.
Or replacement in 3 to 5 years, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
That's repair.
Sir, if I can add on to what Chief Lambert said, the blocking rig is a great idea that we need to explore some more. There's some operational considerations. Where do we house it? Who responds to it? Is it considered an emergency vehicle? Can we drive it with a driver's license that the firefighters have? Or the weight restrictions that are going to require a commercial driver's license? How do we change our response plans? Our neighbors at Confire, when Chief Lambert and I talked to them about this, are running into some challenges staffing their blocking apparatus. So yes, could we go out and purchase it? Absolutely we can, but I don't want to purchase something that's going to sit there that we haven't thought through to see how is our response plan going to adopt that to the freeway? Where do we respond it? Who responds it? And all those other things that go with it. So as we're doing the stations, as we're doing all of this, we're trying to focus staff time to answer those questions, to come back with a very valid, yes, we can do this and here's how we're going to do it, or no, we don't feel that's a good option and we're going to lean on our partners. We could go as far as the California Highway Patrol is the incident commander of a freeway incident. It is their responsibility to provide a safe incident. We do not enter the freeways until they tell us the incident is safe for our personnel to enter. The flip side to that coin is now somebody could say, well, you're delaying patient care to a critical trauma patient. So there's a whole bunch of variables here that we have to track down and vet out.
So do we have a deadline for when that's going to be able to be done?
No, sir, I do not.
Can I then ask that we figure out what a deadline is going to be for that? Because we had 5 pieces of equipment out of service, right?
Yes, sir.
And there are outside.
We had to borrow engine from Confire just to keep type 1 engines rolling. We are looking to purchase a used vehicle using fire chief contingency funds from San Ramon. They took delivery of new equipment. One of their frontline is coming, excuse me, coming off frontline. We're looking to make that $25,000 purchase for a used piece of equipment. So when this happens, we have quality equipment that we can respond to in an emergency. So yes, sir.
Well, again, I don't care if it's a CAL FIRE truck or if it's some old used fire engine that doesn't have any water on it, whatever. But driving one of the ones that we do have that's in short supply and almost impossible to replace in a meaningful amount of time seems like a bad idea. So, I assume it would get rid of the licensing issue and, the where to park it. We have we have 3 parking spaces right next to Station 45 and a 10-foot wide area there that people don't need to drive through every day that we could park it in a heartbeat. So
Can I,
45.
can I present our findings at the June board meeting, sir? Would that be appropriate or?
Sure, that seems like a long time, but okay.
Okay.
I have some concerns.
I gotta unmute your microphone, please.
I have some concerns about taking on the role of blocking highway traffic.
We already do it.
Well, I'm saying, I'm saying, maybe this is an appropriate subject for direction or a change in policy. Maybe it isn't. I'll ask council to listen to my next comments very carefully, which is, it's bad enough to lose $1 million engine. It's worse to lose a firefighter. And I think our number 1, number 2, and number 3 priorities should be that we never lose a firefighter, because we wanted to beat the clock to get out there where we're not certain that we save a life or even save someone's health by getting there 12 seconds earlier. That I want our firefighters to know and our drivers to know that this board member will never penalize a firefighter if it's in his or her opinion that his personal safety or that of his crew, and secondarily that of the $1 million engine, is subject to criticism for getting out there in 180 seconds rather than 120 seconds. And I think we ought to even consider breaking out. We're always looking at response times for our firefighters and our ambulances. I think we ought to break out the response times to an accident on Highway 24, because our priority should be firefighter safety, number 1, 2, and 3, and the integrity of our $1 million engines, number 4. Is there anything that doesn't make sense about that comment? And I don't know that we need to, I think we introduce a whole lot of other problems if we try to buy an engine that we're then using to block off the highway. That's CHP's responsibility, the incident control.
We already do it.
Well, I don't think we should be.
Oh, that's a whole different question.
Are we legally obligated to do that?
Yeah, so I look to the battalion chiefs and our captains, our company officers. The same will apply in any situation, with or without a blocking rig, and that the safety of our first responders is paramount. That's number
Absolutely.
1, just as you mentioned. So, and frankly, as for the battalion chief role that responds to all incidents involving accidents on the freeways, their role is risk management. And to determine, is this worth engaging? Yes or no. If it is not, a standing order is to disengage and re-engage when it is safe. And that includes with or without a blocking rig. And as I mentioned, if it is determined, hey, we can properly set up a scene with the flow of traffic and block the incident to provide patient care, that's where they engage. If not, the other option would be to disengage and put in parameters, just like we would with any other incident, disengage and put in parameters that can provide for safe working locations. Now, there are variables in between, just like any other emergency incident, whether it be a structure fire, a vehicle accident, wildland fires, hazmats. There's things that are undetermined. And I'll reference at 2 a.m. 2 years ago when we had a traffic stop. That means all traffic was stopped on eastbound Highway 24 at 2 a.m. CHP, Caltrans, everybody's on scene, and a car blew through the traffic stop at CHP. So there are some inherent risks. There's many inherent risks with our job. Risk management is always one, and that's one thing that we capitalize with our company officers. But again, I stand by controlling traffic is the best way to prevent incidents.
All right. Well, you've heard my 2 cents on all this. Please, either in closed session or otherwise, maybe privately, we can discuss whatever liability issues we might be looking at. But frankly, I think they're minimal compared with the priority of our personnel safety.
So I hope that none of us disagree with the concept that absolutely the number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 things, the most important thing is protecting the firefighters. But given our current practice, the way we do that is not by closing the road because that's not up to us. We currently do that by putting a blocking vehicle in. And all I'm saying is, since that's our current practice, let's do it effectively and protect not only our firefighters, but the equipment.
But we have to have a crew to man the blocking unit, right? You can't just have one driver sent out there. You got to have 3, don't we?
So
Whatever
that
our
would be
current
some of the
practice is.
operational things that we need to vet out. We would need to talk to labor, this change in working conditions and what they're responding. So
Yeah.
this is part of that big operational discussion that I will have to have and bring that information back.
All right. Fair enough. I'll shut up.
Any more questions? Going on to training.
Good afternoon, directors. Stephen Galing, Battalion Chief in charge of training. Quick and simple, our budget for this year, our goal is to support department education and training for our employees. You'll see a slight increase due to increasing costs of maintaining our training grounds and services to maintain our equipment to allow our personnel to train. Any questions?
Hearing none. Capital projects.
Okay, so I'll begin with capital projects, and then I'll look to Chief Lee here as we dive into his some of his program. So for fire stations, Station 45 is a carryover. It represents from the originally approved $3 million budget. Station 41 is a placeholder until bids received and the design construction for Station 41 is delivered. For the fire engines, one Type 1 engine and one Type 3 engine is requested in addition to fire prevention vehicles, anticipating the maintenance of the fire prevention specialists' positions to maintain the strength. Beginning with apparatus, the replacement is for a 2012 Type 1, and the Type 3 is a 2002 Type 3. Just for reference, a Type 1 is 500 gallons, 1,500 gallons per minute pump. A traditional, so to speak, fire engine, and a Type 3 is a wildland-based rig with 4x4 capabilities that we would see more applicable out of county or in the off-road areas.
Chief, do we presently have one?
What's that?
Type 3?
Yes, sir, we do.
And it's near the end of its life, or it's just additional?
Yes, it's
It's replacement.
As I mentioned, so we have one in place at Station 41. It's a 2002 model. Since then, many of the modern things like steering, use 4x4, the ways that it engages into four-wheel drive is now outdated and of need of replacement.
So this is all great, but I just want to make sure that given the long lead times and some of these kinds of things, are we, in the past, if you forecast it 1 year out, you could get it in a year. That's great. Well, now we need to forecast these 4 or 5 years out. And I realize sometimes you use them until they break, sort of catastrophically break, kind of, or you think they're going to. I know that's hard, But I just want to make sure that we're on the super long lead items. There aren't a lot of things in life that have 4 or 5 year lead times of construction.
Yes, sir.
Um,
So we took that into consideration. That's why we bumped up the ask for a type 1 engine and type 3 engine in the same year, knowing that the lead time is 3 to 5 years. So we would have probably waited a year or so for another type 1 engine, getting 2 back. But because what we're seeing, what we're experiencing, we wanted to bring that ask forward now, because even if we ordered it tomorrow, we're, 4 to 5 years from delivery. So yes, to answer your question, we did consider.
Directors,
You need to unmute.
directors, I wanted to bring something to your attention as well, anticipating the questions I didn't hear. The other thing I want to mention, so we have a robust budget request for maintenance and repairs for our apparatus. This is a used oxygen sensor that was taken off one of our rigs. So the theory of, hey, we have a new fire engine, we should have less maintenance. That's not necessarily the case that we're seeing, because, in large part, because of increased and changes to emissions. In 2006, we had a significant emissions change. In 2011, a second, and now we're seeing more and more emissions requirements. And contrary to popular belief, emergency vehicles are not exempt from emission standards. So there is more equipment, there's more electronics, there's more things that are required for our apparatus to operate under the current emission standards that also require, in turn, more things like this as an oxygen sensor that we did not have previous to this. So just as an example.
So they make you on your old equipment.
Can you unmute your microphone, please?
So they make you on your old equipment go back and put in things that weren't original equipment?
No, sir. No, the old equipment is still holds to that periods of emission standards, but I'm saying equipment that is 2006 or newer, it changes. And so as time changes and emission standards change, these are the types of equipment changes, standards that we're seeing.
Okay.
Okay. I would turn to Chief Lee for an addition.
Directors, I'll be talking about item number 3, EMS LP 35 EKG monitor replacement. So as part of our capital budget request this year, we are requesting the replacement of all EKG monitors on our frontline apparatus for a total of 8 EKG monitors. This will go on our 3 ambulances and 5 type 1 engine and truck for a single unit cost of approximately $70,000. Our EKG monitors are from 2012. They're going on 13 years old at this time. Industry standard is typically 10 years for service life on an EKG monitor. In addition to that, our manufacturer has discontinued the current model. I've had the opportunity to look at the newer version, LP35. There are significant improvements in diagnostic capabilities, end user functionalities that will help our paramedics do their jobs better, ultimately ensuring the best patient outcome possible for our district. They will be used on all medical calls, so they will be, we'll see a high usage. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Do you have an estimate for how long those replacement monitors are expected to last? They have a 5-year, 10
Generally
years?
speaking, the EKG monitors, the recommended service life is approximately 10 years.
We could ask Rescue One to maybe help us with that, or?
They potentially can help with a single unit.
Oh, okay.
A single unit is approximately $70,000 all in, to include freight, tax, shipping.
Great idea. It's worth asking, just like everything else. The only thing they can say is we can't do it.
Okay.
Directors, if I may, real quick on the EKG monitors. This is for this fiscal year and for our frontline equipment. We have monitors that are on our backup equipment, our Type 3 engines, and our reserve engines. So you will see next fiscal year a request coming in to staff or to purchase EKG monitors for all the backup equipment. We felt it was appropriate to do the frontline 1 year and the reserve equipment in the second year.
Is that something that we can obtain some reimbursement for by additional charges when we're using particular equipment? Over a period of 10 years, maybe we get.
Currently in our ambulance billing model, we charge for oxygen mileage. Typically,
We don't charge for
EKG
tests.
monitor is not something that we can do. It's
Why not?
usually bundled in. It's simply the way the insurance, how they pay for transports.
I'm not sure they recognize the EKG as I think it's a basic life, or it would be an advanced life support skill, but I don't know if we get to.
Correct. So it's essentially bundled into what we call an advanced life support transport. So for advanced life support transport, that includes EKG monitoring, potentially an IV, and medications.
So the reason I'm asking, I want to thank you guys, Chief and all the battalion chiefs, as well as Captain Arola. I was lucky enough to go on what was intended to be a ambulance ride along Saturday morning. I showed up at 9 o'clock, didn't waste the time because we ended up spending the day inspecting fire hydrants. But paramedic O'Leary gave me a tour of one of those ambulances, and they are amazing. And as he was showing me out all of the equipment inside that ambulance, I was asking him about billing because it's a very arcane area of the law/insurance. And if we are upgrading the quality of the services or the type of services that we are providing by spending $500,000 on monitor replacements, I think we ought to ask the insurance companies and Medicare and whoever else is reimbursing us. Again, the only thing that they can do is deny us, and they might surprise us by ending up by reimbursing our costs for 40% over the next 10 years. Why not give it a shot? But anyway, I mean, regardless of whether that is something we can do or not, it's an amazing thing to be able to. I've got all kinds of more questions about fire hydrants and the budget we have for maintaining fire hydrants and how I can now recognize by looking at the paint, what the pressure and the volume and everything else. And I want to know how we monitor the tanks. But, I mean, the privilege of being on the board and the privilege of working with you guys is just seeing how amazing it is, the work that you do. And I appreciate being included in your team.
They do great work.
Hey, so
Go ahead.
one more, the fire prevention vehicles, are those like pickups or what are
They're
those?
going to be the cheapest vehicles we can find
Okay.
for them. So if they are a little pickup type, it's a bonus because they do carry some equipment in the back. But if it is a small vehicle or a small car, not a pickup, then that's what we're going to go with.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Or direction.
Well, thank you so much for your patience. We wanted to put faces with responsibilities and budgets, and I know that took a little longer, but I think it was well worth it. So now we are at that point where we need some direction from the board. I've been taking notes. Do you want to change anything in our projections as far as right now you have a general fund projected negative $100,000, which again, I think you're going to make up with salary savings and other savings throughout that budget, but you do have a long discretionary list. I didn't know if there was anything on there like home hardening that you might want to reduce down a little bit. That is your prerogative. You set the policy.
So I made my comments earlier about like the long range interest rates. Do a perplexity search and it'll tell you exactly what the long-term treasury, what short-term treasury rates are going to be for the next 5 years, what the current market, because the stock market and the bond market gives you that forecast. I mean, it's there every day. You can look at it and it's
Right.
as accurate as the whole market thinks is correct every single day. So it isn't, that's the world is predicting it for you. So we should just use whatever they're coming up with and you can literally do it month by month if you want to. I'll give you the forecast. The capital projects is another one of your recommendations. Again, as far as I know, we have for Station 41, we have a number from the architect that we just need to add, at 16.4 plus 30%. And that's going to be low, if anything, because that was a couple-year-old number and it's not going to be, it's going to be a couple more years till we build ours. And he said the range was 30 to 50% for other expenses in addition to the actual hard costs for building the building. And what else is on there? I think we talked about the Lafayette participation of the CERT program, what we're going to do for that. I think in the past, we talked about having the overhead charge for the fuel break being put toward maintenance of fuel breaks, but I guess, we're a little short on cash these days, so that's probably not going to happen this time. But is that what the question was? Because otherwise it just automatically goes into the general fund, right?
Yes, sir. We didn't know, we anticipated it going to the general fund. That's been the standard practice, but we wanted to bring it to the board to see if there was any other things that the board wanted us to do with that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would think for now, general fund, if we already talked about CERT program, capital improvement, I would say continue the home hardening budget right now, and we can look at it again at when we I keep calling it halftime, not halftime. Mid-year, yeah.
Halftime sounds more fun.
I like halftime. But yeah, that mid-year budget, we can look at that again, but we haven't been spending the whole thing and maybe for that project, I don't know where it's trending. Is it going up? I don't really know right
It's
now.
been going up, as I understand it, because more people are using the gutter guards. But I think they're also going to be, we could think of, especially if we're going to implement the zone 0, 5 foot.
Otherwise to spend the money on PR and programs like that anyway. So
Yeah. So
yeah, I
think there's going to be, we've got a lot of prevention stuff in general. We're going to be doing that's going to, again, in my view, that stuff's the penny saved is spending it now is a lot better than, spending it on rebuilding homes that are burned down.
Absolutely.
So, or insurance premiums, either one.
Right.
And I think you also got direction on the staffing for the fuel prevention.
I did.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Guys.
Yeah. I don't have anything else.
And I think we can discuss it more, but for the long range financial forecast, which I realize is a different topic, but we had $2 million in there for admin for the replacement of that building. I think that we probably don't need because again, if you spend $126,000 a year, it would be a very long payback because I think it's going to be more than that to buy whatever we were thinking of buying. And building it would be crazy money, $1,600 a foot.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with, we said we would go back, but I think, after this discussion and look at the long range plan and the budget, I think looking at renting other than buying a building or building would be my direction as well. So I think.
I also heard pursue public-private partnerships wherever possible with the cities or other agencies, or are you all in agreement with that?
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm sorry, Director Jex.
No, I just said I agree.
And can you unmute your microphone?
On the office facilities, I think I would look at rental.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I think we have everything we need. Thank you so
Good job,
much.
everybody.
I'm sorry.
It's a good job, everybody. I think
Thank
all
you.
the presenters and all the people that went behind the presenters that
Yeah.
prepared it all was obviously a lot of good work. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your comments. It was a very lively discussion. I learned a lot. So thank you very much.
And so we will now go ahead and open public comment.
We have two people. Oh, well, he raises his hand first. What the heck? Go ahead. Dick, come on. You're up, Dick. Yeah, you're up.
And if you can state your name for the record.
And I will hand you the card also.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm extremely and seriously concerned about your single paramedic and EMT service decision. Particularly, I am concerned about the elimination of 2 on-duty firefighters in Moraga. That's now currently you have 8 firefighters on duty in Moraga. You're cutting back to 6. That's 25% reduction. And those 2 firefighters I have seen over the years can be very effective in the context of structure fires, wildland fires. You eliminate those 2, and it means the next unit that arrives on scene has to assume what they could do. And those are some very important functions. So that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I also have reservations. I have quite a background in emergency medical medicine, starting with the fact that I was a combat medic in the Army. And I was the person who, on behalf of the county's Emergency Medical Care Commission, did the presentation to the Board of Supervisors of this county to persuade them to allow us to start up paramedic service in the county. And 3 of the first 3 people to graduate from that program, which was run for us by the Stanford University Hospital, were from the Moraga Fire District, including one of them, Rob Goodyear, who got certificate number 1 for the county because he was number 1 in his class. So I'm not a fan of a civilian paramedic and a civilian EMT, and particularly if you look what the training requirements are for an EMT versus a paramedic. Yeah, the total time spent in training is 7 times more for a paramedic. The amount of time in clinical training for an EMT relative to a paramedic has 27 times more training to get their certificate. That's not good. It also occurs to me that for many years, we used to brag in the Moraga Fire District and then subsequently in the Moraga-Orinda Fire District, because I was a commissioner at the Moraga Fire Commission. I was a director here on this board, that we had the highest level of medical service that could be provided. Now you're taking yourself with civilian paramedics and civilian EMTs to the same level as Confire. I really wouldn't be able to differentiate between what Confire gets from out of their contract with AMR and what you're going to get, except that you're now superimposing another level of people to supervise this ambulance program. Sorry about that. Those are my primary reservations. I appreciate you allowing me to share them. Does anybody want to respond before I do?
I appreciate your concerns, sir, and I share all of them. The board of directors is not doing its job unless we're innovating. And this is an innovation. And I'm going to really shock you and everybody else in this room by saying that in my lifetime, if this is a mistake that I make, it will not be the first one. But one of the other things about a board of directors and about our staff is that though we have an obligation to innovate, if it turns out that that ends up being a decision that we evaluate and find out it wasn't the right one, it's not irreversible. And so I'm keeping an open mind. I think based upon what I've seen, the quality of our staff is so good that one of our paramedics is worth 3 anywhere else. one of our firefighters is worth about 3 anywhere else. So I have a fair amount of confidence that this innovation is going to work, particularly since you sat through all of the financial, long-term financial challenges that this board and every other special district and every other government is going to be facing in the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years. We have to innovate. And I hope we've made the right decision and I hope it works out. And I'm fairly confident that it will. But if it doesn't, this board can pivot. And I think we will.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Olson, for addressing us. And, it's a change and it's been very successful in San Francisco. They do it in Berkeley now. They do it in San Ramon.
They cannot do. They're still waiting to start that program 3 years after it was proposed.
Yeah, we are going to get more coverage and that's what we wanted. And, it's, I think that it's something that, like Director Romer said, that we've been planning for over a year now, even more. Probably, I don't have the exact number in my head, but probably 90% of our calls are EMS calls. And we're going to be able to respond quicker and have 2 ambulances in service instead of 1. My understanding, at least when we've talked about this before, from the former fire chief, though firefighters might say differently, but when you're on the ambulance, you're on the ambulance. You don't, that's your primary job. You're not supposed to go and, go into a building on fire or assist in that way. So, I know that's probably not in the real world. It probably doesn't occur all the time, but, so I don't really think we're losing those firefighters. No, that's all I'd say to that.
You gotta unmute your microphone, please.
One of the compelling things I think for me and for the board in general was we respond to, we have 12 or 14 fires a year. And we have hundreds, actually thousands of ambulance calls every year. So it's literally, and now we're going to have during the day, triple the ambulance coverage, not just double. We're going to have triple the ambulance coverage during the day and have the same ambulance coverage at night that we currently do. So we're trading off potentially having 2 extra people go to something that happens 12 or 14 times a year versus having 6 extra people or 4 extra people going to things that happen 1,000 times a year. And that seems like a really good trade-off for us.
Plus, if our ambulance income goes up a little bit and our long-term pension obligations go down a lot, I'm just going to say a little, but what we learn here, that's a huge difference. And that makes the reliability of our pensions for our active firefighters a lot more stable and reliable. And that's a huge obligation on our board. So we'll see.
And we have a second comment also.
And if you can please state your name for the record.
I'm sorry?
If you can state your first and last name.
Sure. So I'm Jason Matthews. I'm in Orinda. I was curious if we could go back to that preparedness slide. Something in that seems odd to me. Is that possible? I think it's about 12 slides back.
I'm checking with the chair.
Sure, go ahead.
When you've been too humble to mention, you're also a valued member of our support staff, Jason. Good to see you.
Oh, thanks, Director. I appreciate that. I'm also the fabled repeater guy.
I'm sorry, what slide you?
Preparedness slide. You all were referring to it as CERT.
No.
Oh,
I think it's.
There you go.
Right there?
Yeah. So I was looking at the budget and the budget says that the operational cost for CERT is $4,000. And so I'm looking at the operating expense here, and the operating expenses for CERT are funded by the Moraga-Orinda CERT Foundation, right? So MOFD is not pumping a bunch of money into CERT. CERT is, for the most part, self-funded. I'm not sure where the $4,000 goes. But in looking at this, right, and so yes, Julie Sparks is the new coordinator. And she kind of stepped in and filled a partial role that Dennis Rain was doing, but he had nothing to do with CERT. And so when I look at the operating expense of $33,500, I wonder where that comes from. I suspect it's her total compensation divided by 3. But then the discussion ensued of, oh, let's go get Lafayette to pay for 1/3 of this job that I'm not sure that she's even allowed to work on because the CERT stuff is all volunteer, right? It's a volunteer job. So I'm not sure she even works on this much during the day. So this notion of trying to beat Lafayette up with a stick to collect, a third of $33,000 seems odd. I think maybe the board could look into how this number was generated and whether it was reasonable, if this was how it's calculated, dividing total comp by 3, whether that's even an appropriate thing to do, because it seems to me that the operating expense to MOFD for CERT is the $4,000 listed in the budget. Comments?
Would you like to?
Yes,
comment
Director.
at all?
Like to correct some of that. So the emergency preparedness position, a portion of that position is used. There's a portion of Julie's time where she focuses on CERT. A lot of that employee's overtime is driven by CERT. CERT uses our vehicles, fuel, maintenance. We pay workers' comp and stuff for the CERT volunteers. So I've heard several times from members of the CERT, and again, I want to be careful how I say this because it's a wonderful program with wonderful people, that they've told me, hey, we're self-sufficient. That's incorrect. If you were self-sufficient, you wouldn't have one of my staff members committing a portion of their daily activities to that. They wouldn't be charging overtime to that. You wouldn't need my vehicles. You wouldn't need space in our facilities to house your equipment. A great, great program. We love doing it. It was a question as the fire chief having budget discussions with some of the asks that we have for facilities and apparatus that I felt was appropriate to bring forward and seek direction and clarification on.
And so I guess my follow-up is, how was that number calculated? How was that $33,000 and change calculated?
Well, I don't know that it needs to be fully
Yeah.
calculated. I think it's it's a very reasonable opening figure in the opening of very friendly and civil negotiations.
Sure.
So let's see where it leads us.
So
I'm not stuck on the number. We could make it 40.
Yeah.
We could make it 27, but 33 seems reasonable to me. I don't know that. I mean, I think you make good points and I agree with them, but
We've asked the chief to follow up, with a report. So I think, I would take these comments and incorporate that into some future agenda item when we talk
Yeah.
about this.
and I trust Chief Isaac's negotiating
Yeah.
ability.
Sure. All right. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Jason.
Thank you.
looks like we have an additional comment. Please.
And please state your name for the.
Jacob Rula, IFF Local 1230. I just wanted to clarify a couple of comments. I really wish the council hadn't left. So not speaking for or against a single role, just clarifying in kind of dangerous area with operational comments, but firefighter paramedics do engage in suppression activities as well as rescue activities. It is not uncommon that we would utilize the firefighter paramedics currently on Medic 41 to get on a hose line and, a 2.5 for to have water going on an adjacent structure to prevent the spread of the fire. It's not and unlikely that we could use them to do secondary search. Under current model, we've been advised not to get them so engaged that if there was an injury to a firefighter that they couldn't, or if we came across a victim, that we couldn't utilize them to then provide treatment and transport. But they currently do engage in that, as well as rescue activities with rope rescue and stuff like that. So we'll send them over the edge on lines to go initiate patient care, something that wouldn't be able to do with the single role paramedics. The other comment that my understanding could be wrong, but we're not increasing the ambulances. Currently, we have Medic 45, Medic 41, and Medic 42 as a third out. Operationally, please correct me if I'm wrong. So that's 3 ambulances available under the proposed model. There would also be 3 ambulances available. Those ambulances are currently available 24/7, whereas at night, we're going to be reduced to 1 full-time single role medic ambulance and 1 potentially cross-staffed ambulance from us. So that'd be 2. So it's not a 3-fold increase. It's status quo in the day and a reduction at night in order to keep engine 45 available more regularly. Thank you.
And I'm just checking if we have any additional public comment.
Okay,
We do not have any hands raised or written public comment.
so do you have all the direction you need?
Yes, sir, we do.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I move we adjourn. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, because we're remote, we just.
I did a
we do
roll
need-
call, sorry.
Director Danziger,
Aye.
Director Jex.
Aye.
Director Romer.
Aye.
And Chair Jorgens. Thank you. Time is 3:24.
I'm gonna turn into a pumpkin here.